The text message wasn't supposed to go to her. I miss you. Some nights it still hurts to breathe without you. Ethan Parker's hands trembled as he stared at his phone screen. The message meant for his late wife's number had just been delivered to the last person on earth who should see his broken heart, his boss, Avery Bennett, the untouchable CEO who could fire him with a single email. His phone buzzed, his stomach dropped. Ethan, are you okay? 3 words that would change everything. Stay with me until the end of this story. Hit that like button and comment your city so I can see how far this journey travels. The fluorescent lights of Parker and Associates hummed their usual monotonous tune as Ethan Parker sat in his cramped office on the 7th floor, surrounded by architectural blueprints and cold coffee cups that had accumulated like tombstones throughout the week. It was 11:47 p.m. on a Friday night, and he was the only soul left in the building, or so he thought. His daughter Sophie was with his mother-in-law for the weekend. The house would be empty when he got home. The silence there had teeth. 3 years. 3 years since cancer had stolen Rebecca from him, leaving behind an 8-year-old daughter who still set out 2 plates at breakfast sometimes, forgetting. 3 years since Ethan had felt like anything more than a ghost moving through his own life, performing the motions of living without actually feeling alive. He pulled out his phone, scrolling to the contact he'd never deleted, Rebecca's number. The carrier had probably reassigned it by now, some stranger in another state getting voicemails from a widower who couldn't let go. But Ethan kept texting anyway. Little updates, confessions, apologies for not being enough to make her stay. Tonight felt heavier than usual. Sophie's school recital had been that afternoon. She'd sung Somewhere Over the Rainbow in a voice so pure it shattered him. Afterward, he'd watched other fathers stand with their wives, watched mothers fix crooked bows and wipe away proud tears. Sophie had looked for her mother in the crowd, that brief flicker of hope in her eyes before reality settled back in. The grief had followed them home like a shadow. Ethan's fingers moved across the screen almost automatically, muscle memory guiding words he'd written 100 times before. I miss you. Some nights it still hurts to breathe without you, Sophie sang today. You would have been so proud. I'm trying to be enough for her, but I don't know if I am. I don't know if I'll ever be. I love you. Always. He hit send without looking, the same ritual he'd performed countless times. Then he set the phone face down on his desk and returned to the blueprint in front of him, a commercial complex design that was due Monday morning. The lines blurred together. Nothing felt important anymore. Nothing felt... His phone buzzed. Ethan glanced at it absently, expecting nothing. Probably a spam notification, or the screen lit up with a name that made his blood turn to ice. Avery Bennett, his boss, the CEO, the woman whose approval could make or break careers, whose expectations were legendary, whose personal life was such a mystery that office speculation had turned it into mythology. Ethan's hand shot out, grabbing the phone so fast he nearly knocked over a coffee cup. The preview was visible on the lock screen. Ethan, are you okay? No. No, 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 no. His fingers were shaking so badly he could barely unlock the phone. When he did, the full horror revealed itself in his messaging app. There, at the top of his recent conversations, was Avery Bennett's name, and below it, his message, the message that was supposed to go to Rebecca, the message about grief and Sophie and not being enough. The message that laid bare every vulnerability he'd spent 3 years carefully concealing behind professionalism and forced smiles. Ethan's mind raced through the possibilities. He must have been scrolling through contacts, must have selected the wrong name. Rebecca and Bennett, they weren't even close alphabetically. How had he... It didn't matter. The damage was done. He stared at her response for a full minute, his architect's brain trying to blueprint an escape route from this disaster. He could pretend it was a mistake, say his phone had been hacked, claim it was meant for someone else. But all of those felt like lies that would only make things worse. His phone buzzed again. I know it's late. You don't have to respond if you don't want to, but I'm here if you need to talk. Ethan's chest felt tight. Avery Bennett didn't do personal. In the 4 years he'd worked for her company, he'd never seen her discuss anything that wasn't related to projects, deadlines, or quarterly earnings. She was brilliant. Everyone acknowledged that. She'd built Parker and Associates from nothing into one of the most respected architectural firms on the East Coast. But she was also distant, professional to the point of seeming almost inhuman. And now she'd seen him at his most broken. He should respond. He should say something, apologize, explain. But his fingers wouldn't move. Another buzz. Ethan, seriously, are you at the office? I can see your computer is still logged in. He looked up sharply at his monitor, at the little green dot next to his name in the company system. Of course she could see that. She probably tracked everyone's hours, knew exactly who was burning themselves out, who was coasting, who was... His office door opened. Ethan's head snapped up so fast his neck cracked. Avery Bennett stood in the doorway. She wasn't supposed to be here. Nobody was supposed to be here. It was nearly midnight on a Friday and she looked different. Not the usual power suit and severe bun. She was wearing jeans, actual jeans, and a simple gray sweater. Her dark hair was down, falling past her shoulders in waves he'd never seen before. Without the armor of her professional wardrobe, she looked younger, more human, more real. I was working late in my office, she said quietly, as if that explained everything. I saw your message and She paused, her usual confidence seeming to falter. I couldn't just leave you here alone. Ethan stood up so quickly his chair rolled backward and hit the wall. Miss Bennett, I'm so sorry. That text wasn't meant for you. It was a mistake. I was trying to... The words tangled in his throat. Ethan. Her voice was gentle in a way he'd never heard from her before. It's okay. You don't have to apologize for grief. The kindness in her tone nearly undid him. She stepped further into his office, and he noticed she was carrying 2 paper cups from the coffee shop on the corner. She set one on his desk. The good coffee, not the sludge from the office machine. I'm not here as your boss right now, Avery said, settling into the chair across from his desk, as if this was perfectly normal, as if CEOs regularly showed up in their employees' offices at midnight to talk about feelings. I'm here as someone who read a text from a person in pain, that's all. Ethan sat back down slowly, his hands gripping the edge of his desk. You didn't have to... I know. She picked up her own coffee, wrapping both hands around it. But I wanted to. The silence stretched between them, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was the kind of quiet that felt like a held breath, like the moment before something shifts. Your daughter sang today? Avery asked finally. Ethan nodded, not trusting his voice. What did she sing? Somewhere Over the Rainbow. The words came out rough. Her mother's favorite song. Avery's expression softened in a way that transformed her entire face. For just a moment, the impenetrable CEO disappeared entirely, replaced by someone who understood exactly what he wasn't saying. How old is she? 8. Sophie. Her name is Sophie. That's a beautiful name. Avery took a sip of her coffee, and Ethan noticed her hands weren't quite steady. Does she look like her mother? Yeah. Ethan felt his throat tighten. Same blonde hair, same smile, same way of tilting her head when she's confused about something. He laughed, but it came out broken. It kills me sometimes, and then I feel guilty for thinking that because she's the best thing, the only thing. He stopped, pressing his palms against his eyes. You don't have to explain, Avery said softly. Grief isn't linear. Some days you're fine, some days you're drowning, and some days you're both at the same time. Ethan looked up at her, really looked at her for the first time. There was something in her eyes, a recognition, a knowing, that went deeper than sympathy. You sound like you understand, he said carefully. Avery was quiet for a long moment, her fingers tracing the rim of her coffee cup. When she spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. I do. 2 words. But they carried the weight of 1,000 untold stories. I lost my husband 7 years ago, she continued, her eyes fixed on her coffee rather than meeting Ethan's gaze. Car accident. 1 minute we were planning our 10th anniversary trip. The next minute, he was gone. Ethan felt his breath catch. In 4 years of working for her, through countless meetings and project reviews and company events, he'd never heard her mention a husband, never seen a ring, never heard even a whisper of it in the office gossip that somehow knew everything about everyone. I'm so sorry, he said, and meant it with every fiber of his being. Thank you. Avery's smile was sad and distant. I buried myself in work afterward. Built this company from the ground up because it was easier than going home to an empty house. Easier than sitting with the silence. She finally looked up at him. I've never told anyone at the office about him. It felt too private, too raw. But when I read your text tonight, she trailed off, shaking her head. I couldn't let you sit here alone carrying that weight by yourself, not when I know exactly how heavy it is. The vulnerability in her confession shifted something in the air between them. This wasn't boss and employee anymore. This was two people who'd both loved and lost, who'd both learned to function while broken, who'd both perfected the art of appearing fine while slowly drowning. Does it get easier? Ethan asked, hating how desperate he sounded but needing to know. It gets different, Avery said carefully. The sharp edges dull a little. You learn to carry it better. But easier? She considered this. I don't know if that's the right word. You just adapt. The grief becomes part of you instead of something separate that attacks you. I'm not sure I'm adapting very well. You're raising a daughter alone. You're here working late on a Friday night to make sure your projects are perfect. You're still standing. Avery's voice was firm now, almost fierce. That's more than adapting, Ethan. That's surviving. That's fighting. Ethan felt something crack open in his chest. Not breaking, but opening. Like a door that had been locked for 3 years suddenly finding its hinges again. Some days it doesn't feel like enough, he admitted. Some days it won't be, Avery said honestly. And that's okay too. They sat in silence again, but it was different now. Comfortable. Understanding. Can I ask you something? Ethan said finally. Of course. Why did you come down here, really? You could have just ignored the text. Pretended you never saw it. Avery set down her coffee cup and looked at him directly, her dark eyes serious. Because 7 years ago, when I was drowning in grief, nobody came, she said quietly. Everyone was very professional, very respectful of my privacy. They gave me space when what I needed was someone to sit with me in the dark and remind me I wasn't alone. She paused. I didn't want to make that same mistake with you. The honesty of it hit Ethan like a wave. Here was Avery Bennett, powerful, successful, untouchable Avery Bennett, admitting to loneliness and regret and the very human need for connection. Thank you, Ethan said, and the words felt insufficient for what he was trying to express. For being here, for understanding, for not making this weird. A small smile touched Avery's lips. Oh, it's definitely weird. Your boss is in your office at midnight discussing grief and dead spouses. This is objectively weird. Ethan laughed, actually laughed, for the first time in what felt like weeks. Okay, fair point. But sometimes weird is exactly what we need. Avery stood up, and Ethan felt an unexpected pang of disappointment that the conversation was ending. You should go home, Ethan. The blueprints will still be here Monday. He stood as well, suddenly aware of how close they were in the small office space. Close enough to see the faint lines at the corners of her eyes, the silver threads in her dark hair, the exhaustion she carried so well that most people never noticed. Will you? Ethan started, then stopped himself. Will I what? Will you forget this happened? On Monday, I mean. When we're back to being boss and employee. Avery tilted her head, considering this seriously. Do you want me to? I don't know, Ethan admitted. Part of me thinks it would be easier, but part of me... He trailed off, not sure how to finish that sentence. Part of you is tired of pretending everything is fine when it's not, Avery finished for him. Part of you is exhausted from performing normalcy when you feel anything but normal. Yeah, Ethan breathed. Exactly that. Then no, Avery said decisively. I won't forget this happened, but I also won't make things awkward at work. We can be professional and still acknowledge that we're both human beings with complicated lives outside these walls. She headed toward the door, then paused. And Ethan? Yes? If you ever need to talk, really talk, not just project updates, my door is open. Not as your boss, just as someone who gets it. Before Ethan could respond, she was gone, her footsteps fading down the hallway. He stood alone in his office, staring at the space where she'd been, wondering what the hell had just happened. His phone buzzed one more time. A text from Avery. Go home. Hug your daughter. The work will wait. Ethan looked at the blueprints spread across his desk, at the cold coffee and the late-night hours he'd planned to pour into avoiding his empty house. Then he grabbed his jacket and headed for the door. The house was dark when Ethan pulled into the driveway at 12:47 a.m. His mother-in-law's car was in the driveway. She must have brought Sophie home early. The porch light was on, the one Rebecca had insisted they install for safety, the one Ethan could never bring himself to turn off because it felt like her somehow. He let himself in quietly, expecting everyone to be asleep. But his mother-in-law, Janet, was sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of tea, still dressed despite the late hour. "Ethan?" She stood up quickly, concern etched across her face. "I'm sorry. I know I was supposed to keep her until Sunday, but she had a meltdown after the recital, crying for Rebecca, asking why her mama couldn't be there. I thought it would be better if she was home." Guilt crashed over Ethan in a wave. He'd been so consumed with his own grief that he hadn't fully considered how the recital would affect Sophie. Of course she'd struggled. Of course seeing all those other mothers would hurt. "Is she asleep?" he asked quietly. Finally, it took almost 2 hours. Janet's eyes were red-rimmed with her own tears. "She's so young to carry this much pain." "I know." Ethan set his keys on the counter, exhaustion settling into his bones. "I'm sorry I wasn't here." "You were working. You're doing your best." Janet reached out and squeezed his arm. "But Ethan, you can't work every Friday night. Sophie needs you present, not just providing." "I know," he said again, because what else could he say? She was right. He'd been using work as an escape just like Avery had, filling the silence with blueprints and deadlines instead of dealing with the grief that lived in his daughter's eyes. Janet studied his face for a long moment. "Something's different. Did something happen?" Ethan thought about lying, about deflecting, but he was so tired of carrying everything alone. "I sent a text to my boss by mistake," he said. "Something personal, about missing Rebecca. She showed up at the office." Janet's eyebrows rose. "Avery Bennett came to the office at night? You know who she is?" "Sophie talks about her sometimes, says you work for a lady who built a whole company. She thinks that's very cool." Janet's expression turned curious. "What did Miss Bennett say?" She understood. Ethan leaned against the counter, remembering the conversation with a strange mix of emotions he couldn't quite name. "She lost her husband too, 7 years ago. I never knew." "And she came to check on you?" "Yeah." Janet was quiet for a moment, then smiled softly. "Rebecca would have liked her." The comment surprised Ethan. "Why do you say that?" "Because Rebecca always appreciated people who showed up when it mattered, not with platitudes or casseroles or awkward sympathy, but really showed up." Janet picked up her purse from the counter. "I should let you get some rest. Call me if Sophie has another rough night." After she left, Ethan climbed the stairs slowly, his body heavy with exhaustion that went deeper than physical tiredness. He paused outside Sophie's door, listening to her soft breathing. Slowly, he pushed it open. Sophie was curled up in her bed, her blonde hair spread across the pillow, one arm wrapped around the stuffed rabbit Rebecca had given her for her 5th birthday. Even in sleep, her face showed traces of tears. Ethan sat carefully on the edge of her bed, brushing a strand of hair from her forehead. She stirred slightly, but didn't wake. "I'm sorry, baby girl," he whispered. "I'm sorry I'm not enough. I'm sorry your mama isn't here. I'm sorry for all of it." Sophie's eyes fluttered open, unfocused and drowsy. "Daddy?" "I'm here, sweetheart. Go back to sleep." "You're late." Her voice was small and sleepy. "I know, I'm sorry. Grandma said you were working on buildings." "I was, but I'm home now." Sophie was quiet for a moment. Then, "Did you tell Mama about my song?" Ethan's throat constricted. "I did." "What did she say?" The question shattered him. Because what could he say? That he texted a dead woman's phone number? That his wife would never respond, never hear about the recital, never fix bows or wipe proud tears again? "She said she was proud of you," Ethan managed. "So proud. Just like I am." Sophie's small hand found his. "I miss her, Daddy." "I miss her too, baby. Every single day." "Does it ever stop hurting?" Ethan thought about Avery's words. "Gets different. The sharp edges dull a little." "It gets easier to carry," he said carefully. like a heavy backpack. At first it's so heavy you can barely walk, but then you get stronger. The backpack doesn't get lighter, but you get better at carrying it. Sophie considered this with the seriousness that 8-year-olds sometimes possessed. I don't want to forget her. You won't. I promise you won't. She's part of you. She's in your smile and your laugh and the way you sing. She's always going to be with you. Okay. Sophie's eyes were already closing again. Love you, Daddy. Love you more, Sophie Bug. He sat there until her breathing deepened and evened out, until he was sure she was truly asleep. Then he stood carefully and headed to his own bedroom. The bed felt too big, the way it always did. Rebecca's side still made with decorative pillows she'd insisted on buying, even though they'd just throw them on the floor every night. He'd kept them because removing them felt like erasing her. Ethan changed into sleep clothes mechanically, his mind replaying the evening's events. The accidental text, Avery's unexpected appearance, her confession about her own loss. The strange intimacy of sharing grief with someone who truly understood. His phone buzzed on the nightstand. Another text from Avery. I hope you made it home safely. Sleep well. Ethan stared at the message for a long time before responding. Made it home. Thank you again for tonight. It meant more than you know. Her response came quickly. Anytime. And I meant what I said. My door is open. Ethan set his phone down and lay back against the pillows, staring at the ceiling fan that had needed oiling for 6 months. He should fix it. Add it to the list of things he should do, but kept putting off because functioning at a basic level felt like achievement enough. But for the first time in 3 years, he didn't feel quite so alone in the dark. Saturday morning arrived with Sophie bouncing on his bed at 7:15 a.m., all traces of last night's tears replaced with the boundless energy of childhood. Daddy, wake up! It's Saturday. Can we make pancakes? Ethan groaned, pulling the pillow over his head. Sophie, it's so early. It's morning. Morning means pancakes. She tugged at the blanket. Please? With chocolate chips? He couldn't help but smile at her persistence. This was the Sophie he recognized, bright and bouncing and uncontainable. The grief came in waves for her, intense and devastating, and then gone again, replaced by the natural resilience of youth. Okay, pancakes, but you have to help. I always help. 20 minutes later, the kitchen was a disaster zone of flour and eggshells and chocolate chips that somehow ended up everywhere except in the batter. Sophie stood on a step stool at the counter, carefully pouring batter onto the griddle with her tongue stuck out in concentration. Not too much, Ethan coached. About a quarter cup for each one. I know, Daddy. I'm a professional pancake maker. Oh, is that right? Yep, Grammy said so. They worked in comfortable silence for a few minutes, the smell of pancakes filling the kitchen, the morning light streaming through the windows Rebecca had specifically chosen for this exact quality of sunshine. Daddy? Sophie said suddenly, her voice uncertain in a way that made Ethan's attention sharpen. Yeah, sweetheart? Is it okay if I'm not sad all the time about Mama? Ethan's hand stilled on the spatula. He turned to look at his daughter, at the worry creasing her small forehead. Of course it's okay. Why would you think it's not? Because yesterday I was so sad at the recital. I cried and cried. But this morning I woke up excited about pancakes, and I felt bad because... She trailed off, biting her lip. Because you thought you should still be sad? Ethan finished gently. Sophie nodded, her eyes welling up. Ethan crouched down so they were eye level. Sophie, listen to me. Your mama would want you to make pancakes and be excited about Saturday mornings. She would want you to laugh and play and have fun. Being happy doesn't mean you love her any less. Really? Really? Mama loved hearing you laugh. Remember how she used to tickle you just to hear your giggle? A small smile broke through Sophie's tears. She called it my sunshine laugh. Exactly. And she wouldn't want you to stop having that sunshine laugh just because she's not here to hear it anymore. Sophie threw her arms around his neck, nearly knocking him over. Okay, Daddy. They finished making pancakes, though Sophie's were definitely more chocolate chip than pancake. They ate at the kitchen table, Sophie chattering about her friend Emma's birthday party next week, and whether they should get a dog, and if Ethan thought mermaids were real. Normal. Beautifully, wonderfully normal. And then the doorbell rang. Ethan glanced at the clock, 8:47 a.m. on a Saturday. Who would be visiting this early? I'll get it. Sophie jumped up, but Ethan caught her shoulder. Let me check first, Bug. He walked to the front door, peering through the peephole, and nearly fell over. Avery Bennett was standing on his porch, in jeans again, and a casual blue sweater, her hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. She was holding a cardboard carrier with what looked like coffee cups, and was that hot chocolate? Ethan looked down at himself. Old sweatpants, a t-shirt that had seen better days, barefoot, probably with flour in his hair from Sophie's enthusiastic pancake making. This couldn't be happening. He opened the door slowly, certain he was still asleep, and this was some strange dream. Miss Bennett? His voice came out higher than intended. Hi. She looked almost nervous, which was so unlike her usual commanding presence that it threw him completely off balance. I'm sorry to just show up. I probably should have called first, but I was at the coffee shop and I thought... She held up the carrier. I brought coffee and hot chocolate. I wasn't sure if Sophie liked coffee yet, but that seemed unlikely for an 8-year-old, so I got hot chocolate instead, and now I'm rambling, which I never do, so I'm going to stop talking. Ethan stared at her, his brain trying to catch up with reality. Who is it, Daddy? Sophie appeared behind him, peering around his leg. Her eyes widened. Whoa. Are you a princess? Avery laughed, actually laughed, and it transformed her entire face. Not quite. I'm Avery. I work with your dad. You're the lady who built a company. Sophie's face lit up with recognition. Daddy told me about you. He says you're the smartest person at his work. Ethan felt his face flush. Sophie, well, your dad is pretty smart too, Avery said, crouching down to Sophie's level. He designs the most amazing buildings. I brought hot chocolate. Do you like hot chocolate? I love hot chocolate. Sophie practically vibrated with excitement. Can she come in, Daddy, please? Ethan was still trying to process what was happening. His boss was on his porch on a Saturday morning, bringing coffee and hot chocolate for his daughter. Of course, he heard himself say. Come in. Sorry about the mess. We were making pancakes. Avery stepped inside, and Ethan was suddenly hyper-aware of every detail of his house. The photos of Rebecca still everywhere. Sophie's toys scattered across the living room floor. The dishes in the sink. The life he'd been living in survival mode. Not caring about appearances because no one ever came over. But Avery didn't seem to notice any of it. Or if she did, she didn't care. Pancakes sound amazing, she said warmly. What kind? Chocolate chip. Sophie grabbed her hand, leading her toward the kitchen like they were old friends. I made them myself. Well, Daddy helped, but I did most of it. Ethan followed behind, feeling like he'd stepped into an alternate universe. Avery settled at their kitchen table, as if she belonged there, accepting the slightly lopsided pancake Sophie insisted on serving her. She took a bite and made exaggerated sounds of appreciation that made Sophie beam with pride. These are the best pancakes I've ever had, Avery declared seriously. Better than restaurant pancakes? Sophie asked skeptically. Way better. Because you made them. Sophie glowed under the praise, and Ethan felt something shift in his chest. When was the last time someone other than family had shown interest in his daughter, had sat at their table and made her smile like that? So, Ethan said, finding his voice finally, not that I'm not happy to see you, but why are you here? At my house. On a Saturday morning. Avery met his eyes, and there was something vulnerable in her expression. I couldn't stop thinking about our conversation last night, about you going home to an empty house. Except it wasn't empty, was it? You have Sophie. She looked at his daughter, who was already halfway through her hot chocolate. And I thought maybe you both could use some company today. If I'm overstepping, please tell me. I know this is weird. I know showing up at your home crosses all kinds of professional boundaries, but It's okay, Ethan interrupted gently. You're not overstepping. The relief on Avery's face was palpable. Do you like building stuff? Sophie asked suddenly, apparently done with adult conversation. I do, Avery said. That's actually what I do for work. Your dad and I design buildings together. Can you help me with my school project? Sophie's eyes were wide and hopeful. I have to make a solar system and it's due Monday and I haven't started yet because I was sad yesterday. Ethan opened his mouth to tell Sophie that Ms. Bennet probably had better things to do than, "I would love to help you with your solar system," Avery said, her voice warm and genuine. "What do you have for supplies?" And just like that, Ethan's Saturday morning plans, which had consisted of laundry and maybe fixing the leaky sink, completely changed. An hour later, his living room floor was covered in styrofoam balls, paint, glitter, and pipe cleaners. Avery sat cross-legged on the carpet in her expensive jeans, helping Sophie paint Jupiter's great red spot, while explaining the concept of gas giants in terms an 8-year-old could understand. Ethan watched from the doorway, coffee in hand, trying to reconcile this scene with everything he knew about Avery Bennet. The CEO, who intimidated senior architects, was currently covered in glitter, arguing with his daughter about whether Saturn's rings should be silver or gold. "Silver is more accurate," Avery was saying. "But gold is prettier," Sophie countered. "You make an excellent point. How about we do both? Gold on top, silver underneath?" "Perfect." They worked together like they'd known each other for years, not hours. Sophie chattered constantly about her best friend Emma, about her teacher who gave too much homework, about the dog she desperately wanted but Ethan kept saying no to. "Why won't your dad let you get a dog?" Avery asked, shooting Ethan a look that was almost playful. "He says dogs are a lot of work," Sophie sighed dramatically. "Dogs are work," Ethan admitted from the doorway. "But that's not really why." Both Avery and Sophie looked up at him, paint-covered hands frozen mid-stroke. "Then why?" Sophie's voice was small, genuinely curious rather than challenging. Ethan set down his coffee cup and came to sit on the floor with them, the memories heavy on his shoulders. "Because your mom always wanted a dog. We talked about getting one after—" He paused, the words catching. "After she got better. We were going to go to the shelter together and pick one out as a family." Sophie's eyes filled with understanding beyond her years. "And getting one without Mama feels wrong." "Yeah, Bug. It does." Avery was quiet, her fingers still wrapped around a paintbrush dripping gold onto newspaper. She didn't offer platitudes or suggestions. She just sat there, present in the grief that had suddenly filled the room. "But Daddy," Sophie said softly, "what if Mama would want us to get a dog anyway? What if she'd be sad that we're not doing fun things because she's not here?" The wisdom of children could cut deeper than any blade. Ethan looked at his daughter, this brave, beautiful child who was trying so hard to navigate a world that had stolen her mother, and felt something crack in his chest. "You might be right," he managed. "I'm always right," Sophie declared, her mood shifting with the lightning speed of childhood. She turned to Avery conspiratorially. "Can you help me convince him?" Avery held up her hands, laughing. "Oh no, I'm not getting in the middle of this. That's between you and your dad." "But you're a grown-up. Grown-ups listen to other grown-ups. Is that how it works?" Ethan raised an eyebrow at his daughter. "That's definitely how it works," Sophie said with complete confidence. They returned to painting planets, but something had shifted. The grief was still there. It was always there. But it felt less suffocating with Avery in the room. Like her presence somehow made it okay to acknowledge the pain without drowning in it. By noon, Saturn had glittering rings that were indeed both gold and silver. Jupiter's red spot was magnificently swirled, and Mars was appropriately rusty-looking. Sophie had glitter in her hair and paint on her nose, and she was beaming with pride at her creation. "This is the best solar system ever made in the history of school projects," she announced. "I think you might be right," Avery agreed seriously, "though we should probably add some facts to your presentation board. Want to know something cool about Saturn?" "Yes." "Its density is so low that if you could find an ocean big enough, Saturn would actually float in it." Sophie's eyes went wide. "A floating planet? That's impossible." "It's true. It's made mostly of gas, so it's incredibly light for its size." "Daddy, did you know planets could float?" Ethan smiled. "I did, actually, but I think Ms. Bennet explains it better than I do." "Call me Avery," she said suddenly, looking at him. "At least here. Outside of work. Ms. Bennet feels too formal when I'm covered in glitter on your living room floor." "Avery," Sophie tested the name. "I like it. It sounds like very, but with an A." "That's exactly what my husband used to say." The words slipped out before Avery seemed to realize what she was saying. She froze slightly, as if surprised by her own admission. Sophie tilted her head, that characteristic gesture Ethan had mentioned the night before. You had a husband? I did, a long time ago. Where is he now? Children had no filter, no awareness of boundaries that adults spent years constructing. Ethan started to intervene, to redirect the conversation, but Avery shook her head slightly. He died, she said gently. In a car accident. Sophie processed this with the solemn consideration she had learned from her own loss. Like my mama died. From cancer. Yes, like that. Do you miss him? Every day, Sophie nodded, understanding in a way most 8-year-olds shouldn't have to. Me too. I miss my mama every day. She paused, adding more glitter to Saturn's rings, even though they were already completely covered. But Daddy says she's still with me, in my smile and my laugh and stuff. Your daddy's right, Avery said softly. The people we love never really leave us. They're in everything we do. Did your husband like space? Sophie asked, apparently satisfied with the depth of that conversation and ready to move on. Avery laughed, the sound surprised and genuine. Actually, he did. He was a pilot. Not the space kind, but he loved flying. He used to say being up in the sky made him feel closer to the stars. That's beautiful, Ethan said quietly, and Avery's eyes met his across Sophie's blonde head. And that look was shared understanding, shared pain, and something else, something warm and tentative and new. I'm hungry, Sophie announced, breaking the moment. Can we have lunch? Ethan glanced at his watch, surprised to find it was already past 1 o'clock. Sure, Bug. What do you want? Grilled cheese. Of course you do. He stood, his knees protesting from sitting on the floor. Avery, you're welcome to stay, if you want. He half expected her to make an excuse, to remember she had important CEO things to do, to retreat back into her professional armor. But instead, she smiled. I'd like that. In the kitchen, while Sophie washed paint and glitter off her hands in the bathroom, Ethan pulled out bread and cheese, hyper-aware of Avery leaning against the counter watching him. Thank you for this, he said, not looking at her. For coming over, for helping with the solar system, for being so good with Sophie. You don't have to thank me. Avery's voice was soft. I wanted to be here. Why? The question came out before he could stop it. I mean, not that I'm not grateful, but this isn't normal. CEOs don't usually show up at their employees' houses on Saturday mornings to build school projects. Avery was quiet for a moment, her fingers tracing patterns on the granite countertop Rebecca had picked out 6 years ago. When I lost James, she said finally, I shut down. I threw myself into work because it was the only thing that made sense. Numbers and blueprints and contracts. They had rules. They were logical. Grief wasn't logical. She looked up at him. I spent 7 years building a company because I didn't know how to build a life anymore. And then last night, reading your text, seeing someone else in that same dark place I lived in for so long. She trailed off, shaking her head. I couldn't just leave you there. And when I woke up this morning, I kept thinking about Sophie, about how you have this beautiful daughter who needs you present, not just providing. And I thought maybe I could help, even just for one day. Ethan felt his throat tighten. You did help, more than you know. She's an amazing kid. She is. She's the only reason I'm still standing most days. I can see that, Avery smiled. She has your eyes, but I bet she has her mother's spirit. Yeah. Ethan pulled out the griddle, focusing on the familiar motions of making lunch. Rebecca was fearless, jumped into everything head first. She would have loved watching Sophie grow up, seeing who she becomes. Tell me about her, Avery said suddenly. If you want to. People stopped asking me about James after a while, like he became this forbidden topic. But I wanted to talk about him. I wanted people to know he existed. Ethan looked at her, really looked at her, and saw the loneliness there. 7 years she'd carried this alone. 7 years without anyone to share the weight. Rebecca was a teacher, he began, buttering bread. 2nd grade, she loved it. Every September she'd come home with stories about her new students, remembering all their names by the 2nd day. He smiled at the memory. She couldn't pass a bookstore without buying children's books for her classroom. Our house was full of them. They're still here, Avery observed, gesturing to the bookshelf visible from the kitchen, still stuffed with colorful spines. I couldn't get rid of them. Sophie reads them now. That's beautiful. Rebecca would sing all the time. In the shower, cooking dinner, doing laundry. Drove me crazy sometimes because she couldn't carry a tune to save her life. But now, his voice cracked slightly. Now the house is too quiet. Sophie bounded back into the kitchen, hands clean but hair still sporting glitter. I'm starving to death. So dramatic, Ethan said, but he was smiling. Grilled cheese coming right up. They ate at the kitchen table, Sophie dominating the conversation with a detailed explanation of why dolphins were better than sharks, which somehow evolved into a debate about whether mermaids could be real if we hadn't explored all the ocean yet. The ocean is huge, Sophie argued, like bigger than everything. There could totally be mermaids. She makes a compelling point, Avery said to Ethan. Don't encourage her. I'm just saying we shouldn't rule anything out, Sophie grinned triumphantly. See, Daddy? Avery believes in possibilities. After lunch, Sophie insisted on showing Avery her room, which meant a full tour of every stuffed animal, every drawing, every treasure an 8-year-old had accumulated. Ethan followed behind, watching as Avery gave each item her full attention, asking questions and making comments that showed she was genuinely interested. When Sophie pulled out the photo album, the one with pictures of Rebecca, Ethan tensed. But Avery sat on the floor with Sophie, looking through page after page, listening to stories about when Mama was here. She's beautiful, Avery said, studying a photo of Rebecca laughing at Sophie's 3rd birthday party, chocolate cake on both their faces. She was, Sophie agreed matter-of-factly. Daddy says I look like her. You do, especially your smile. Sophie beamed at that, then her expression turned serious. Do you have pictures of your husband? Avery's hand stilled on the page. Not with me, but I have some at home. What was his name? James. Did he make you laugh? The question was so innocent, so purely childlike, but it hit something deep. Avery's eyes glistened slightly. All the time. He was the funniest person I ever met. Mama made Daddy laugh too, I remember. Sophie turned another page, pointing to a photo of all 3 of them at the beach. That was before she got sick. We went to the ocean and I built a sandcastle and Mama helped. And it was the best day. Ethan's chest felt tight watching them. These 2 people who'd both known loss, connecting over shared grief and memories, and the strange comfort of being understood. His phone buzzed. A text from his mother-in-law. How's Sophie doing today? Better than yesterday? He typed back. Much better. Working on her solar system project. Janet's response came quickly. Good. She needs normal days, you both do. Ethan looked up at Avery and Sophie, now giggling over a photo of Rebecca with green hair from a St. Patrick's Day celebration at her school. Normal. This didn't feel normal exactly, having his boss sitting on his daughter's bedroom floor looking at family photos, but it felt good. It felt right in a way nothing had felt right in a very long time. Daddy, Sophie called, come look at this one. He joined them on the floor, and for the next hour they went through the album together, Ethan sharing stories he hadn't told in years, about how he and Rebecca met at a mutual friend's wedding, how their first date was supposed to be dinner but turned into a 6-hour conversation at a coffee shop because they couldn't stop talking, how Rebecca cried when he proposed, even though she'd been dropping hints for months. Avery listened to all of it, and occasionally she'd share something about James too, how he could fix anything, how he made perfect scrambled eggs, how he'd proposed during a sunset flight, landing the plane just to get down on one knee in a field of wildflowers. That's so romantic, Sophie sighed. He was a romantic, Avery agreed, even when it drove me crazy. Did you love him more than anything? Sophie asked with the blunt curiosity of children. I did, Avery said softly. More than anything except maybe myself, which he always said was exactly as it should be. Ethan met her eyes over Sophie's head, and in that moment, something passed between them. Recognition, understanding, the beginning of something neither of them had names for yet. The afternoon slipped into early evening without anyone noticing. Sophie dragged them both outside to the backyard, where she proceeded to give them a tour of her garden, a small patch where Rebecca had helped her plant vegetables the spring before she died. Most of them were weeds now, but Sophie tended them with dedication. These are my tomatoes, she announced, pointing to plants that were definitely not producing tomatoes. And these are my carrots. Impressive, Avery said, crouching down to examine the garden with appropriate seriousness. Mama and I planted them. Well, Mama planted them, and I helped by getting dirt everywhere. Sophie giggled at the memory. She said gardening was messy work. She was right about that. They sat on the back porch steps while Sophie ran around the yard, her energy apparently endless. The sun was starting to sink lower, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. This is nice, Avery said quietly. Being here, with you both. I haven't felt this settled in a long time. Ethan looked at her, at the way the fading sunlight caught in her hair, at the genuine smile on her face as she watched Sophie chase a butterfly. I haven't either, he admitted. She turned to face him fully, and the moment stretched between them, heavy with unspoken things. Ethan, Avery, can you come push me on the swing? Sophie called from across the yard. Daddy pushes too hard and I don't like going that high. The moment broke. Avery laughed and stood up. Duty calls. Ethan watched as she crossed the yard to the swing set. Another thing Rebecca had insisted on. Another piece of their life that remained. Avery pushed Sophie gently, the two of them talking and laughing, and something shifted in Ethan's chest. Hope. Terrifying, exhilarating hope. By the time the sun fully set, Sophie was yawning despite her protests that she wasn't tired at all. Avery glanced at her watch and seemed surprised by the time. I should probably go, she said, though she didn't sound like she wanted to. It's almost Sophie's bedtime. No, Sophie protested. You can stay for dinner, right, Daddy? Ethan should say no, should let Avery leave, should reestablish normal boundaries, should remember that this woman was his boss and this had already gone far beyond appropriate, but he didn't want her to go either. We're probably just having spaghetti, he said. Nothing fancy, but you're welcome to stay if you want. Avery's smile was answer enough. Dinner was chaotic in the best way. Sophie insisted on helping, which meant tomato sauce ended up on the counter, the floor, and somehow the ceiling. They cooked and laughed and talked, and it felt like something Ethan had forgotten existed. Family dinner, but different. New. This is delicious, Avery said, twirling pasta on her fork. Daddy makes the best spaghetti, Sophie declared loyally. Even better than the restaurant kind. High praise. After dinner, Sophie's exhaustion finally caught up with her. She fell asleep on the couch in the middle of the movie she'd insisted they watch, her head on Ethan's lap, one hand still clutching her hot chocolate mug. She's out, Avery whispered, smiling at the sight. She does this, fights sleep until she literally can't anymore. Ethan gently extracted the mug from Sophie's grip. I should get her to bed. I'll help. Together they carefully lifted Sophie, Ethan taking most of her weight while Avery steadied her head and carried her upstairs. Sophie stirred slightly when they laid her in bed, mumbling something about Saturn's rings before settling back into sleep. Ethan pulled the blanket up to her chin, brushing her hair back from her forehead. Good night, Bug, he whispered. Downstairs, the house felt different, quieter, more intimate now that it was just the two of them. Thank you for today, Ethan said, walking Avery to the door. You didn't have to spend your entire Saturday with us, but I'm really glad you did. So am I. Avery paused at the door, her hand on the knob but not turning it. Ethan, can I ask you something? Of course. Would it be okay if I came back? Not all the time. I don't want to intrude on your life, but maybe sometimes She seemed to struggle for words, which was so unlike the confident CEO he knew. I had more fun today than I've had in 7 years, and I don't want to go back to how things were before. Ethan's heart was pounding. What were things like before? Lonely, Avery said simply. So incredibly lonely. The honesty of it broke something open in him. He stepped closer, close enough to see the vulnerability in her eyes, close enough to smell her perfume mixed with paint and glitter and tomato sauce. I know that feeling, he said quietly. And yes, please come back. Yeah? Yeah. Avery's smile was brilliant. Okay, good. She opened the door, stepping out onto the porch where this whole strange, wonderful day had begun. I'll see you Monday at work? Monday at work. We'll be professional. Completely professional. They both knew it was a lie, but it felt necessary to say anyway. Avery started down the porch steps, then turned back. Your personal number. Can I have it? Not for work emergencies, just to talk. Ethan pulled out his phone, and they exchanged numbers like teenagers, both of them smiling at the absurdity and intimacy of it. Good night, Ethan. Good night, Avery. He watched her walk to her car, a sleek sedan that seemed incongruous with the woman who'd spent the day covered in glitter, and drive away. Only when her taillights disappeared around the corner. Did he go back inside? The house was quiet again, but it felt different now, less empty, more alive. His phone buzzed almost immediately. Thank you for letting me in today, for letting me be part of your world. It meant everything. Ethan stared at the message, his fingers hovering over the keyboard. There were 1,000 things he wanted to say, 1,000 feelings he didn't know how to name. Finally, he typed, "Thank you for showing up, for seeing us, for understanding." Her response came quickly. "I'll always show up. You don't have to carry everything alone anymore." Ethan sat on his couch in the quiet house, reading and rereading that message. The fear was still there, the guilt of moving forward, the terror of opening his heart again, the weight of protecting Sophie from more loss. But underneath it all was something he hadn't felt in 3 years. Possibility. He thought about Rebecca, about what she would think of today, about Avery sitting on their living room floor helping Sophie with planets, pushing their daughter on the swing, laughing at dinner like she belonged there. And he absolutely knew, that Rebecca would have loved her. His phone buzzed again. Sleep well? See you in my dreams. Too much? That's too much. Pretend I didn't say that. Ethan laughed out loud in the empty room. Not too much. See you in mine too. Upstairs, Sophie was sleeping peacefully, her solar system project waiting on the dining room table to be taken to school Monday. The house that had felt like a mausoleum for 3 years suddenly felt like a home again. Ethan stood and checked the locks, turned off the lights, and headed upstairs. In his bedroom, he paused by the photo on his nightstand. Rebecca on their wedding day, radiant and alive and full of future. I think I might be ready, he whispered to the photo, to try again. To let someone in. Is that okay? The photo didn't answer, but Ethan didn't need it to. He knew what Rebecca would say. She'd tell him that love wasn't a finite resource, that opening his heart again didn't diminish what they'd had, that Sophie needed to see him happy, to know that grief didn't have to be the end of the story. His phone buzzed one more time. I lied. I'm not dreaming yet. Too awake, too happy. Today was perfect. Ethan smiled, typing back, It really was. Same time next Saturday? It's a date. He sent it before he could overthink it, and only after it was delivered did he realize what he'd said. It's a date. Not sounds good or sure thing, but it's a date. Avery's response was just a simple heart emoji, but it made Ethan's own heart race. He fell asleep that night with his phone on the pillow beside him, messages from Avery still glowing on the screen, and for the first time since Rebecca died, he dreamed about the future instead of the past. The future where maybe, just maybe, his broken family could become whole again in a completely new way. The future where loneliness didn't have to be forever. The future that had started with a wrong text and a woman brave enough to show up anyway. Monday morning arrived with the awkward weight of uncertainty. Ethan stood in front of his closet longer than necessary, changing his shirt twice before settling on something that looked professional, but not like he was trying too hard. His reflection in the mirror showed a man caught between worlds, the widower who'd been surviving on autopilot for 3 years, and someone new. Someone who'd spent Saturday covered in glitter and Sunday texting with his boss until 2 in the morning about everything from Sophie's obsession with mermaids to their shared love of terrible action movies. The office felt different when he walked in at 8:30. Same fluorescent lights, same hum of printers and keyboards, same architects hunched over their desks with coffee mugs and blueprints. But Ethan felt exposed somehow. Like everyone could see that something fundamental had shifted over the weekend. Morning, Parker. Tom Chen from the design team nodded as Ethan passed. How was your weekend? Good. Quiet. The lie came automatically, practiced from 3 years of deflecting personal questions. Except his weekend had been anything but quiet. Ethan settled at his desk, trying to focus on the commercial complex design that was due for review. But his eyes kept drifting to the corner office on the 15th floor, where Avery's light was already on. She'd beaten him here. Of course she had. The woman probably arrived at 6 every morning. His phone buzzed with a text. "Good morning. How's the solar system looking in daylight?" Ethan smiled despite himself, glancing around to make sure no one was watching before typing back. "Saturn's rings are shedding glitter everywhere. My car looks like a disco ball exploded. Worth it, though. Completely worth it." He hesitated, then added, "Professional today, right?" "Absolutely. I'm wearing my intimidating CEO face as we speak." Terrifying. You have no idea. I made 3 junior architects cry before 8 a.m. Ethan laughed out loud, quickly covering it with a cough when someone looked over. This was dangerous. Texting his boss about glitter and intimidation tactics while sitting in the office they both worked in, but he couldn't seem to stop smiling. The morning passed in a blur of blueprints and calculations. Ethan forced himself to focus, to do the work that had been his refuge for so long. Around 11, his desk phone rang. The internal line. "Parker here?" "Mr. Parker, this is Diane from Ms. Bennett's office. She'd like to see you in her office at noon to discuss the Riverside project." Ethan's stomach did a complicated flip. The Riverside project. Right. The actual reason they worked together. The professional relationship that existed before Saturday morning, and glitter and solar systems. "Of course. Noon. I'll be there." He spent the next hour preparing, pulling together his designs and notes for Riverside, a mixed-use development that would be the firm's biggest project this year. This was important. Career-defining. He needed to be sharp, focused, professional, not thinking about how Avery had looked pushing Sophie on the swing with the sunset behind her. At exactly noon, Ethan knocked on Avery's office door. "Come in." She was every inch the CEO when he entered, hair pulled back in a sleek bun, wearing a charcoal suit that probably cost more than his car payment, sitting behind a massive desk with 3 monitors and a view of the city skyline. The office was immaculate. Modern furniture, awards on the walls, everything precisely placed. No trace of the woman who'd sat on his living room floor covered in paint and glitter. "Mr. Parker, thank you for coming." Her voice was formal, professional. "Please, have a seat." Ethan sat in one of the chairs across from her desk, spreading out his Riverside designs. "I've finalized the residential tower specs. The sustainable features you wanted are integrated throughout. Solar panels, rainwater collection, green spaces on multiple floors." Avery studied his work with the intense focus that had built her company. She asked sharp questions, pushed back on design choices, suggested modifications. This was the Avery Bennett everyone knew. Brilliant, exacting, uncompromising. Ethan matched her professionalism, defending his choices with data and expertise. They debated load-bearing structures and aesthetic flow, zoning regulations, and budget constraints. It was exactly like every other project meeting they'd ever had, except for the fact that Ethan now knew she took her coffee with 2 sugars and a splash of cream, that she laughed with her whole body when something genuinely amused her, that she'd lost someone too and carried that weight alone for 7 years. "These modifications will work," Avery said finally, sitting back in her chair. "Good work, Mr. Parker. The client presentation is Thursday. I'll need final renderings by Wednesday afternoon." "I can do that." "Excellent." She made a note on her tablet, then looked up at him. For just a second, her professional mask slipped and he saw warmth in her eyes. "How was Sophie's presentation? The solar system?" The question was quiet, almost tentative, like she wasn't sure if personal topics were allowed in this space. "She got an A+, Ethan said, his own voice softening. Her teacher said it was the most creative solar system she'd ever seen. Sophie told everyone that her friend Avery helped her make it. Avery's smile was genuine, transforming her face. "Did she?" "She talks about you nonstop. Apparently you're now the coolest person she knows, which is quite an achievement since her current obsession is astronauts." "I'm honored to be ranked above astronauts." The moment stretched between them, professional boundaries blurring at the edges. Ethan was acutely aware that this was his boss, that they were in her office, that anyone could walk by the glass walls and see them. But he was also aware of the way her eyes softened when she talked about Sophie, the way her fingers fidgeted with her pen like she was nervous, the way the air felt charged between them in a way that had nothing to do with architecture. "Avery," he started. Her office door opened without warning. Marcus Webb, the firm's CFO, walked in with a stack of financial reports. "Avery, I need your signature on..." He stopped, noticing Ethan. Oh, sorry, didn't know you had a meeting. Just finishing up. Avery's professional mask snapped back into place seamlessly. Mr. Parker, we'll continue this discussion later. Please have those renderings to me by Wednesday. Yes, Ms. Bennett. Ethan gathered his materials, nodding at Marcus on his way out. In the hallway, his heart was still racing. The abrupt shift from personal to professional had given him whiplash. But maybe that's how it had to be here. Two separate worlds, carefully partitioned. His phone buzzed. Sorry about that. Marcus has terrible timing. It's fine. We were done anyway. Were we, though? Ethan stopped walking, reading the message 3 times. The words felt weighted with meaning beyond their surface. Professional, remember? Right. Professional. Completely professional. Which is why I'm definitely not thinking about Saturday. Me neither, liar. Ethan smiled, tucking his phone away before he did something stupid like continue flirting with his boss via text while standing in the middle of the office. The week developed a rhythm. During work hours, they were Miss Bennett and Mr. Parker, professional, focused, maintaining appropriate boundaries. But in the evenings, after Sophie went to bed, Ethan's phone would buzz with messages from Avery. They talked about everything and nothing. Books they'd read, movies they loved, childhood memories, dreams they'd given up on. Tuesday night, she texted, "What's something you gave up after Rebecca died?" Ethan stared at the question for a long time before answering. Playing guitar. We used to play together, badly, just for fun. I can't pick it up without hearing her laugh at my terrible chord progressions. That's beautiful, though, the memory. Yeah, but it hurts too. Everything good hurts a little when they're gone. Wednesday night, Ethan asked, "What do you miss most about being married?" The small things. Someone to tell about my day. Someone who knew when I needed silence versus when I needed to talk. Someone to cook for besides myself. I miss that too. The witness. Having someone who saw my life. I see you now. Those 4 words stopped his breath. Simple, direct, profound. I see you too, he typed back. Thursday afternoon, Ethan delivered the final Riverside renderings to Avery's office. She reviewed them with her usual thoroughness, making notes and asking questions. When she was satisfied, she stood and grabbed her jacket. The client presentation is at 3. You're coming. It wasn't a question. I thought senior architects handled client presentations. You designed it. You should present it. Avery met his eyes. You're brilliant at what you do, Ethan. It's time people saw that. The use of his first name in the office startled him, but her expression was purely professional, all business. The presentation went flawlessly. Ethan explained his design choices with confidence he'd forgotten he possessed, walking the client through sustainable features and aesthetic choices. Avery watched from the side of the conference room, and twice he caught her smiling with what looked like pride. The client signed the contract before they left the building. That was impressive, Avery said in the elevator afterward, just the 2 of them heading back up to the office. You're wasted in your current position. I like where I am. You're capable of more. She turned to face him fully. I'm promoting you to senior architect, effective immediately. Ethan's mind went blank. What? You heard me. Your work is exceptional, you have vision, and you just closed a $20 million deal. Senior architect, with the salary and office that comes with it. Avery, this isn't because of, he gestured vaguely between them, unable to articulate what this even was. This is because you're good at your job, she said firmly. Everything else aside, you've earned this. Don't insult either of us by suggesting otherwise. The elevator doors opened onto their floor. Avery stepped out, then turned back. Friday night, dinner, you, me, and Sophie. Not a date. Just friends having dinner, if you want. Before Ethan could answer, she was gone, striding down the hallway to her office like she hadn't just upended his entire world. Promoted. She'd promoted him and invited him to dinner. His phone buzzed. Say yes to dinner. Sophie mentioned wanting to try that new pizza place. How do you know what Sophie wants? We've been texting. She wanted to thank me for helping with her project. Ethan felt his chest constrict. Avery had been texting with his 8-year-old daughter. The thought should have alarmed him, boss texting with employee's child. but instead it made him feel something warm and terrifying. "You've been texting my daughter behind my back? She has excellent grammar for an 8-year-old. We discuss important topics like whether dolphins or whales are cooler." And the verdict? Dolphins. Obviously. They smile. Ethan laughed, drawing looks from colleagues walking past. He didn't care. "Friday night? Pizza." "Yes, perfect. I'll pick you both up at 6. That evening, Ethan told Sophie about the dinner plans while she did homework at the kitchen table. "Avery's coming over again?" Sophie's face lit up like Christmas morning. "We're actually going out to that pizza place you wanted to try." "Like a family dinner?" The question hit him harder than it should have. "Like friends having dinner." Sophie gave him a look that was far too knowing for 8 years old. "Daddy, Avery's not just your friend." "What do you mean?" "You smile at your phone when she texts, and you got all nervous when she came over, and you use your happy voice when you talk to her." Ethan felt heat creep up his neck. "I don't have a happy voice." "You totally do. It's the voice you used with Mama." Sophie paused, her expression turning serious. "Is that okay, that you like Avery?" The directness of children could be devastating. Ethan sat down across from her, choosing his words carefully. "Would it bother you if I did? Like her, I mean." Sophie considered this with the gravity of a judge. "I don't know. Sometimes I think it would be nice if you weren't sad all the time. But sometimes I feel bad because what if Mama's watching and she's sad that you like someone else?" Ethan's throat tightened. "Come here, bug." Sophie climbed into his lap, even though she was getting too big for it, even though her legs dangled awkwardly. Ethan held her tight. "Your mama loved me very much," he said carefully. "And I loved her, I still do. That never goes away." He paused, trying to find the right words. "But love isn't like a pizza with only 8 slices. It doesn't run out. Loving someone new doesn't mean I love your mama less. Like how I can love you and Grammy and Grandpa and Emma all at the same time." "Exactly like that." Sophie was quiet for a moment, processing. "Do you think Mama would like Avery?" "Yeah, bug. I really think she would." "Me too." Sophie leaned back to look at him. "Avery's nice, and she's really smart. And she listens when I talk, not like when adults pretend to listen, but they're really thinking about other stuff. She is good at listening. So it's okay if you like her, as long as you don't forget about Mama." "Never," Ethan promised. "We'll never forget about Mama." Sophie nodded, satisfied, and went back to her homework. But Ethan sat there for a long time, marveling at the resilience of children, at their capacity to make room for new love without erasing the old. Friday evening arrived faster than Ethan expected. He changed shirts 3 times while Sophie watched from his bed, finally settling on a simple blue button-down. "You look nice, Daddy." "Not too nice." "Is there such a thing as too nice?" "Your wisdom is showing, bug." Sophie giggled, spinning in her own outfit, a purple dress with stars that she'd insisted on wearing. "Do I look nice?" "You look beautiful." At exactly 6 o'clock, the doorbell rang. Sophie raced to answer it, and Ethan heard her excited greeting from upstairs. "Avery, I wore my space dress because you like space." "That dress is amazing. We match. See my earrings?" Ethan came downstairs to find Avery showing Sophie her earrings, which were indeed tiny silver moons. She was wearing jeans and a soft green sweater, her hair down in waves. She looked beautiful and approachable, and nothing like the intimidating CEO from the office. "Hi," she said, smiling at him. "Hi." The moment stretched between them while Sophie bounced impatiently. "Can we go? I'm starving." The pizza place was packed with families, couples, groups of teenagers. They got a booth near the window, Sophie insisting on sitting next to Avery so she could tell her important things. Those important things turned out to be a detailed explanation of why her friend Emma was wrong about unicorns being better than Pegasuses. "Pegasuses can fly, and they're real horses," Sophie argued. "Unicorns are just horses with horns." "Just horses with horns?" Avery raised an eyebrow. "That feels dismissive of unicorns. Are you Team Unicorn?" "I'm Team Let's Order Pizza Before Your Dad Faints from Hunger." Ethan laughed. "I'm not that hungry." Your stomach growled twice. "Traitor stomach." They ordered pepperoni for Sophie, vegetarian for Avery, half and half for Ethan, because he couldn't decide. The restaurant hummed with conversation and laughter around them, families and friends sharing Friday night together. "This is nice," Avery said quietly, looking around. "I haven't been to a place like this in years." "Too busy building empires?" Ethan teased. "Something like that." She took a sip of her water. "I forgot what it was like to just be out, with people, not for business dinners or networking events, just for fun." "Daddy never goes out either," Sophie chimed in. "We mostly eat at home or at Grammy's house." "Well, we should change that," Avery said, looking at Ethan. "There's a whole city out here to explore." The pizza arrived, and Sophie proceeded to eat like she'd never seen food before, getting sauce on her face and talking with her mouth full about school and friends and the dog she still desperately wanted. "You're relentless about this dog thing," Ethan said. "Persistence is a virtue," Sophie declared. "Where did you learn that?" "Avery told me. She said that's how she got her company to be successful. She was persistent." Ethan shot Avery a look. "Are you teaching my daughter business strategy?" "Someone has to prepare her for world domination." "She's 8. "It's never too early to start planning," Sophie beamed, clearly delighted to have Avery as an ally. After dinner, they walked down the street to an ice cream shop. The evening was warm, summer lingering into early fall, and the town had that gentle evening glow that made everything feel softer. Sophie ran ahead, pointing out dogs and bikes and interesting clouds, while Ethan and Avery walked together in comfortable silence. "Thank you for this," Ethan said quietly, "for including us in your Friday night." "Thank you for letting me be included." Avery's shoulder brushed his as they walked. "I meant what I said. I haven't done this in so long. Normal life, just existing with people I care about." "You care about us?" She stopped walking, turning to face him. They were standing under a streetlight, Sophie's laughter floating back from where she'd found a dog to pet. "Yes," Avery said simply. "I care about you, both of you, more than I probably should, more than is probably wise, but yes, I care." Ethan's heart hammered against his ribs. "Avery, you don't have to say anything. I know this is complicated. I'm your boss, you're still grieving, there's Sophie to consider. I know all of that." She looked at him with an openness that took his breath away. "But I can't keep pretending this is just friendship. Not when I think about you constantly. Not when every text from you makes my whole day better. Not when being with you both feels more like home than anything has in 7 years." The confession hung between them in the warm evening air. People walked past on the sidewalk, completely unaware that Ethan's world was tilting on its axis. "I'm scared," he said finally. The truth, raw and honest. Of moving forward, of dishonoring Rebecca's memory, of Sophie getting attached, and then I leave, Avery finished gently. "Ethan, I can't promise I'll never leave. None of us can promise that. Life is fragile and uncertain and terrifying. We both know that better than most." She stepped closer. "But I can promise that I'm here right now, that I want to be here, that I'm willing to try if you are." Ethan looked at her, really looked at her. This woman who'd shown up at his door with coffee and hot chocolate, who'd spent hours on his living room floor building solar systems, who'd pushed his daughter on swings and texted her about dolphins, who'd understood his grief because she carried her own, who made him feel alive again. "I'm terrified," he admitted. "Me too." "What if we mess this up?" "Then we mess it up. But what if we don't?" Sophie came running back, ice cream menu in hand. "They have Superman flavor. Can I get Superman flavor?" The moment broke, but the weight of it lingered. Avery squeezed Ethan's hand once, quickly, before turning to Sophie. "Superman flavor sounds perfect." They got ice cream. Superman for Sophie, chocolate for Avery, vanilla for Ethan, because some things were classic for a reason. They sat at a small metal table outside the shop, watching people pass by, eating ice cream as the sun finally set completely. "This is the best Friday ever," Sophie declared, her face covered in blue and red ice cream. "It really is," Avery agreed, her eyes meeting Ethan's across the table. On the drive home, Sophie fell asleep in the back seat, exhausted from excitement and sugar. Avery drove while Ethan sat in the passenger seat, hyper-aware of her presence, of her hands on the wheel, of the way the dashboard lights illuminated her face. "You're staring," she said softly, not taking her eyes off the road. "Am I?" "Yes." Sorry. Don't be. She glanced at him quickly. I like it. When they pulled into Ethan's driveway, the porch light was on, the one that always stayed on. Avery put the car in park but didn't kill the engine. I should get Sophie to bed, Ethan said, making no move to leave. You should. Neither of them moved. Avery, what you said earlier, I meant every word. Ethan took a breath, gathering courage. I care about you too. So much it scares me. And I want to try. Don't know what this is or where it's going or how to navigate it, but I want to try. Avery's smile was brilliant, even in the dim light. Yeah? Yeah. She reached across the console, taking his hand. Her fingers were warm, her grip firm and sure. We'll figure it out, she said. Together. Together, Ethan echoed. Behind them, Sophie stirred, mumbling about Superman ice cream. The moment was broken, but something fundamental had shifted. Ethan carried Sophie inside while Avery waited by the car. He tucked his daughter into bed, her space dress replaced with pajamas, her face cleaned of ice cream residue. She barely stirred, exhausted and happy. Back outside, Avery was leaning against her car, looking up at the stars. Beautiful night, she said when Ethan joined her. Yeah. They stood in silence for a moment, shoulders touching, looking at constellations Rebecca had once pointed out to him. I should go, Avery said, but she didn't move. You should. Ethan? Yeah? She turned to face him fully, and suddenly they were inches apart, close enough that he could see the flecks of gold in her dark eyes, close enough to feel her breath. I'm going to kiss you now, she whispered. If that's okay. Ethan's response caught in his throat. He managed a nod, his heart thundering. Avery leaned in slowly, giving him every chance to pull away. But Ethan didn't pull away. When her lips met his, gentle and questioning, he felt something in his chest crack wide open. The kiss was soft, tentative, full of promise and possibility. It tasted like chocolate ice cream and new beginnings. When they pulled apart, Avery's eyes were shining. Was that okay? She asked quietly. More than okay. She smiled, pressing one more quick kiss to his lips before stepping back. Good night, Ethan. Good night. He watched her drive away, her taillights disappearing into the night. Then he went back inside, locked the door, and leaned against it, his fingers touching his lips where she'd kissed him. Upstairs, he passed Sophie's room and found her sitting up in bed, awake, after all. Did you kiss Avery? She asked, no judgment in her voice, just curiosity. Ethan's face flushed. Were you spying? I looked out the window. That's not spying, that's observing. Observing, huh? So did you? There was no point lying. Yes, I kissed Avery. Sophie considered this seriously. Good. She makes you smile again. Then she flopped back down, apparently satisfied with this development, and went right back to sleep. Ethan stood in her doorway for a long moment, marveling at the resilience of his daughter, at the unexpected turns life could take, at the woman who'd walked into their lives through a mistaken text message. In his room, his phone buzzed. I can still feel that kiss. Me too. No regrets? None. You? Not a single one. Ethan looked at the photo on his nightstand. Rebecca, on their wedding day. He picked it up, studying her face, her smile, the joy captured in that frozen moment. I'm trying, he whispered to the photo. I'm trying to live again. I hope that's okay. And somehow, in the silence of his room, he felt like she was giving her blessing. The weeks that followed moved like a river finding its course, sometimes rushing forward with exhilarating speed, sometimes pooling in quiet moments that felt stolen from time itself. Avery became a fixture in their lives in a way that felt both natural and miraculous, like she'd always been meant to fit into the spaces Rebecca had left behind. Saturday mornings meant pancakes with all three of them in the kitchen, flower fights that left the counters looking like a snowstorm had hit, and Sophie's running commentary on everything from why cats were secretly aliens to her detailed plans for becoming an astronaut veterinarian scientist. Sunday afternoons found them at the park where Ethan had first realized what was happening between them, Sophie on the swings, while Avery and Ethan sat on the bench talking about dreams they'd buried and futures they were afraid to imagine. At work, they maintained their professional distance with varying degrees of success. Ethan in his new corner office as senior architect, Avery in her glass-walled domain on the 15th floor. But sometimes their eyes would meet across conference rooms during project meetings, and the air would charge with everything they couldn't say in front of colleagues. "Mr. Parker, your thoughts on the structural modifications?" Avery would ask, her voice perfectly neutral. "I think the load distribution needs recalculation, Mrs. Bennett," he'd respond, equally professional, while his phone buzzed in his pocket with a text from her that read, "Stop looking at me like that, or everyone will know." The office gossip mill churned with speculation about Ethan's sudden promotion, about the way Ms. Bennett seemed different lately, softer somehow, quicker to smile. But no one suspected the truth. How could they? The untouchable CEO and the widowed architect seemed like characters from different stories entirely. 3 weeks after that first kiss, Avery stayed for dinner on a Wednesday night. It wasn't planned. Sophie had begged her to help with a science project about ecosystems, and somehow homework had turned into spaghetti and meatballs, which had turned into a movie on the couch. Sophie fell asleep between them halfway through the film, her head on Avery's shoulder, one small hand clutching Ethan's. "She's out cold," Avery whispered, looking down at Sophie with such tenderness that Ethan's chest ached. "She does this. Falls asleep the second she stops moving. Should we wake her?" "In a minute. She's comfortable." They sat in the dim living room, the movie playing forgotten on the screen, with Sophie breathing softly between them. Avery's free hand found Ethan's across Sophie's sleeping form, their fingers intertwining. "I could get used to this," Avery said quietly. "Yeah?" "Yeah." She looked at him, her eyes serious in the flickering light from the television. "This feels like home, Ethan. You both feel like home." The words should have terrified him. Instead, they settled into his chest like something he'd been waiting to hear without knowing it. "You feel like home to us, too," he said. Later, after they'd carried Sophie to bed and stood together in the hallway outside her room, Avery turned to leave. "Stay," Ethan said, the word escaping before he could second-guess it. Avery froze. "Ethan, not like that. I mean, just stay. It's late. The guest room is made up." "I don't want you driving home when you're tired." She studied his face, searching for something. "Are you sure?" "I'm sure." The guest room had been Rebecca's office once, then a storage room for 3 years, then finally converted into a proper bedroom when Ethan's mother had come to help after Rebecca died. Avery stood in the doorway, taking in the simple furniture, the blue curtains, the small nightstand with a reading lamp. "This is nice," she said. "It's not much." "It's perfect." She turned to face him, and they were suddenly very close in the doorway, the rest of the house dark and quiet around them. "Thank you for asking me to stay." Ethan reached up, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. The gesture felt intimate, domestic, like something married couples did without thinking. "Thank you for being here," he said, "for showing up, for not running away when you saw how complicated my life is." "Your life isn't complicated, it's full. There's a difference." Avery leaned into his touch. "And I'm not going anywhere." He kissed her then, soft and slow, and it felt different from that first kiss in the driveway. Less tentative, more certain, like they were writing a new story together, one page at a time. When they pulled apart, Avery was smiling. "Good night, Ethan." "Good night." He made it 3 steps down the hallway before turning back. "Avery?" "Yeah?" "I'm really glad you answered that text." Her laugh was soft and warm. "Me too. Best wrong number I ever got." In his own room, Ethan lay awake for a long time, staring at the ceiling and marveling at how quickly life could shift. 4 weeks ago, he'd been drowning. Now he was breathing again. Actually breathing, not just going through the motions of survival. His phone buzzed on the nightstand. "I can hear you thinking from here." He smiled in the darkness. "Can you?" "The ceiling is very loud, apparently." "Can't sleep." "Me neither. Too comfortable. Too happy. Too scared I'll wake up and this will all be a dream." "It's not a dream. Promise?" "Promise." Morning came with Sophie jumping on his bed at 7:30, completely oblivious to the fact that they had a guest. "Daddy, wake up! I had the best dream about dolphins and—" She stopped mid-sentence, her eyes going wide. Is Avery still here? She stayed in the guest room. It was late. Sophie's face split into a grin. She had a sleepover. It wasn't a sleepover exactly. But Sophie was already racing down the hallway, probably to wake Avery with the same enthusiastic energy she'd used on him. Ethan groaned, dragging himself out of bed and heading to intercept before his daughter completely ambushed. Too late. Sophie's excited voice echoed from the guest room. Avery, you're still here. Can we make breakfast together? Please, please, please? Ethan appeared in the doorway to find Avery sitting up in bed, her hair adorably disheveled, wearing one of his old t-shirts he'd given her to sleep in. She looked soft and rumpled and completely at ease despite Sophie bouncing on the edge of her bed. Breakfast sounds perfect, Avery said, catching Ethan's eye over Sophie's head. What should we make? French toast, Sophie declared, with extra cinnamon. 20 minutes later, the kitchen was chaos again. Sophie stood on her step stool, whisking eggs, while Avery taught her the secret to perfect French toast, and Ethan made coffee and marveled at how this had become his life. The key is real vanilla extract, Avery was saying, and you have to let the bread really soak up the mixture. How do you know so much about French toast? Sophie asked. My mom taught me. Sunday mornings, we'd make breakfast together before church. Do you still see your mom? Avery's expression shifted, something painful flickering across her face. She passed away 5 years ago. Cancer. Sophie processed this with the matter-of-fact acceptance of a child who understood loss. So you lost your husband and your mom? I did. That's a lot of losing. Yeah, it is. Sophie was quiet for a moment, carefully dipping bread into the egg mixture. Then she looked up at Avery with those two wise eyes. But now you have us. Avery's hand stilled on the pan. When she spoke, her voice was thick with emotion. Now I have you. Ethan turned away, ostensibly to get plates from the cabinet, but really to compose himself. The simple declaration from his 8-year-old daughter had undone something in him. This was real. This was happening. His daughter was claiming Avery as theirs, and Avery was accepting that claim with tears in her eyes. They ate breakfast together at the kitchen table, the same table where Rebecca had paid bills and helped with homework and planned Sophie's birthday parties. But the ghosts felt quieter now, more peaceful, like Rebecca was watching and approving of this strange new family forming in the spaces she'd left behind. After breakfast, Avery reluctantly said she needed to go home, change clothes, handle some things at her apartment. Sophie hugged her goodbye with the fierce possessiveness of childhood affection. When are you coming back? Sophie demanded. Soon, I promise. Tomorrow? Avery laughed, looking to Ethan for help. Let Avery have her own life, Bug, he said gently. But Avery crouched down to Sophie's level. How about Saturday? We could go to the science museum you've been talking about. Sophie's shriek of joy was answer enough. At the door, Ethan walked Avery to her car. The morning was crisp and bright. Neighbors walking dogs and washing cars, normal suburban Saturday unfolding around them. Thank you for staying, Ethan said. Thank you for asking me to. Avery leaned against her car, looking up at the house. This feels dangerous, you know. Getting this attached, building this life with you both. Dangerous how? Because now I have something to lose again. She met his eyes. I'd forgotten how terrifying that is, having people you can't imagine living without. Ethan stepped closer, cupping her face in his hands. We're not going anywhere. You can't promise that. No, but I can promise I'm here now. That's all any of us can do. He kissed her there in his driveway in broad daylight, where any neighbor could see, where maintaining professional distance was impossible, and he didn't care. When they pulled apart, Avery was smiling through tears. Saturday, Science Museum. It's a date. It's a date. The following week brought a different kind of challenge. Ethan's mother-in-law called Tuesday evening, her voice tight with barely controlled emotion. Ethan, I need to talk to you about something. His stomach dropped. Is everything okay? Is it so, Sophie? Sophie's fine. This is about... Janet paused, and he could hear her taking a breath. I saw you, last Saturday morning, with that woman. The world tilted. Janet, is she your boss, the CEO you mentioned? There was no point lying. Yes. And you're involved with her? It's complicated. Is it serious? Ethan looked across the living room where Sophie was doing homework, completely oblivious to the conversation that could shatter everything. Yes, it's serious. Janet was quiet for so long, Ethan thought the call had dropped. Then, Rebecca's been gone 3 years. I know. Sophie needs stability. I know that too. Does this woman understand what she's getting into? A widower with a daughter? The complications that come with that? She lost her husband too, 7 years ago. She understands grief better than most people. Another long silence. I'd like to meet her. Ethan's heart hammered. Janet, if she's going to be part of Sophie's life, I need to meet her. Rebecca would have wanted that. The mention of Rebecca felt like a blade between his ribs. Okay, when? This Sunday. Dinner at my house. Bring her. The call ended before Ethan could respond. He sat staring at his phone, panic and hope warring in his chest. Janet's approval mattered, not just because she was Rebecca's mother, but because she was Sophie's grandmother, the link to the woman they'd lost. When he texted Avery about it, her response was immediate. Oh, that's big. You don't have to do this. We can take it slower. Ethan, I told you, I'm not going anywhere. That includes meeting your mother-in-law. She might hate you, then she hates me, but at least she'll know I'm serious about you both. Sunday dinner at Janet's house loomed like a final exam Ethan hadn't studied for. He changed shirts 4 times while Sophie watched with barely concealed amusement. You're nervous, she observed. Grammy can be intimidating. Grammy loves you. Grammy loved your mother. This is different. Sophie tilted her head in that characteristic way. Are you scared Grammy won't like Avery? Yeah, Bug, I am. Grammy will love her. Avery's great. If only it were that simple. Avery arrived at 6, wearing a simple dress and carrying flowers. Yellow roses, which Janet had once mentioned were her favorites, a detail Ethan had mentioned in passing weeks ago. The fact that Avery remembered made his chest tight. In the car, Sophie chattered nervously, filling the silence with stories about Grammy's house and her cat, and the cookies she always baked. Avery listened with focused attention, but Ethan could see the tension in her shoulders, the way her hands gripped the steering wheel slightly too tight. It's going to be fine, he said quietly, reaching over to squeeze her hand. You don't know that. I know Janet. She's fair. And she loved Rebecca too much not to want Sophie and me to be happy. What if she thinks I'm trying to replace her daughter? You're not. And I'll make sure she knows that. Janet's house was exactly as Ethan remembered. A small colonial with a perfectly maintained garden, the porch light always on, family photos visible through the front window. He could see Janet watching them approach, her silhouette backlit by the warm glow of her living room. The door opened before they could knock. Ethan, Sophie. Janet's eyes moved to Avery, assessing and unreadable. And you must be Avery Bennett. Miss Walker, thank you for inviting me. Avery offered the roses. Ethan mentioned these were your favorite. Janet took the flowers, her expression softening fractionally. They were Rebecca's favorite too. She always said yellow roses meant friendship. The comment hung in the air, weighted with meaning. Avery didn't flinch. They're beautiful flowers, she said simply. I can see why you both loved them. Janet studied her for another long moment, then stepped aside. Come in. Dinner's almost ready. The house smelled like pot roast and fresh bread, exactly like every Sunday dinner Ethan had shared here over the years. Photos of Rebecca covered every surface. Rebecca as a child, as a teenager, on her wedding day, holding newborn Sophie. The house was a shrine to a woman who'd been gone 3 years but still dominated every room. Ethan watched Avery take it all in, saw her shoulders straighten as she absorbed the weight of Rebecca's presence. But she didn't shrink from it. Instead, she paused at a photo of Rebecca and Janet from Sophie's first birthday. She was beautiful, Avery said softly. Sophie looks just like her. Janet's voice was thick when she responded. She does. More every day. Dinner was tense at first, the conversation stilted and careful. Janet asked questions, polite, surface-level things about Avery's company, her background, how she'd met Ethan. Avery answered honestly, including the story of the mistaken text, which made Janet's eyebrows rise. So you showed up at his house because of a message meant for my daughter's phone number? I showed up because someone was in pain, and I understood that pain, Avery said quietly. The rest just happened. Grammy, Avery helped me with my solar system project, Sophie interjected, apparently tired of the adult tension. She knows everything about space. Not everything, Avery corrected with a small smile. But I do love astronomy. Rebecca loved the stars too, Janet said, and it wasn't an accusation, just a statement of fact. Ethan told me. I think that's beautiful. They made it through dinner without disaster. Sophie helped clear plates, chattering about school and friends, providing buffer against the uncomfortable silences. When Janet brought out coffee and pie, apple, Rebecca's recipe, the real conversation finally began. Sophie, why don't you go play with Whiskers in the den? Janet suggested. I need to talk to the adults. Sophie looked between them nervously, but obeyed, disappearing into the next room with the cat. Janet set down her coffee cup with deliberate precision. Ms. Bennett, please call me Avery. Avery. Janet's eyes were sharp, assessing. My daughter has been gone 3 years. For 2 of those years, Ethan barely functioned. He went to work, he took care of Sophie, but he was just going through motions. No joy, no life. She paused. The past month, I've seen him smile again, really smile. Sophie says he has a happy voice when he talks to you. Ethan felt heat creep up his neck. I need to know your intentions, Janet continued. Are you serious about my son-in-law and my granddaughter, or is this just a rebound? Something convenient? Janet, Ethan started, but Avery shook her head. It's okay, she has every right to ask. Avery met Janet's gaze directly. I lost my husband 7 years ago, car accident. For 7 years I've been alone, throwing myself into work because it was easier than feeling anything. Then I got Ethan's text, this raw, honest expression of grief, and something in me recognized a mirror to my own pain. She paused, choosing her words carefully. I'm not trying to replace your daughter. I couldn't even if I wanted to, but I care about Ethan and Sophie deeply, more than I thought I could care about anyone again. And yes, it terrifies me, because I know what it's like to lose someone you love. I know that devastating loss, but I also know that hiding from love because you're scared of losing it means you're not really living at all. Janet's eyes glistened. Rebecca would have said something very similar. Then she was wiser than I am. It took me 7 years to figure that out. Are you good to my granddaughter? I try to be. Sophie is remarkable. Smart and funny and so brave in the face of loss. Being with her reminds me what resilience looks like. And Ethan? Avery looked at him, and the emotion in her eyes made Ethan's breath catch. Ethan is one of the best men I've ever known. He's kind and thoughtful, and he's been raising an amazing daughter while carrying unbearable grief. He deserves to be happy. They both do. Janet was quiet for a long moment, her fingers tracing the rim of her coffee cup. When she spoke, her voice was soft. Rebecca made me promise something before she died. She was in the hospital, knowing she wouldn't make it, and she grabbed my hand and said, "Make sure Ethan finds someone. Don't let him be alone forever." Janet's voice broke. I promised her, but when it actually happened, when I saw you with him, I felt angry, like you were taking her place. I'm not taking her place, Avery said gently. There's a Sophie-shaped space and an Ethan-shaped space in my heart. But the Rebecca-shaped space in theirs, that's still hers. I would never try to fill that. Janet stood abruptly, and Ethan tensed, unsure what was coming. But she walked around the table and pulled Avery into a hug. Thank you, Janet whispered, for making him smile again, for being good to Sophie, for not running away from our complicated, grief-filled family. Avery hugged her back, and Ethan saw tears streaming down both their faces. When they pulled apart, Janet turned to Ethan. She's good for you. Rebecca would have liked her. The simple approval undid him. Ethan blinked hard against tears. Thank you, Janet. Don't thank me. Just be happy, both of you. Life's too short for anything else. They stayed another hour. The tension dissolved into genuine conversation. Janet showed Avery more photos of Rebecca, shared stories about her childhood, her teaching career, her final months. Avery listened to all of it with genuine interest, asking questions, laughing at funny memories, crying at sad ones. Sophie fell asleep on the couch with the cat, exhausted from the emotional evening. Ethan carried her to the car while Avery and Janet said their goodbyes on the porch. You're welcome here anytime, Janet said. For Sunday dinners or just coffee, you're part of this family now. Thank you, Avery managed through tears. That means more than you know. In the car, with Sophie sleeping in the back seat and the stars bright overhead, Ethan reached for Avery's hand. You were amazing, he said. I was terrified. You didn't show it. Years of practice being CEO. She smiled through tears. But really, I meant everything I said. About you both, about being serious. I know you did. He brought her hand to his lips, kissing her knuckles. I love you. The words escaped before he could stop them. 3 words he hadn't said to anyone except Sophie and Rebecca since his wife died. They hung in the air of the car, massive and terrifying and true. Avery's breath caught. She pulled the car over to the side of the road, putting it in park, turning to face him fully. Say that again, she whispered. I love you, Avery. I'm in love with you. And it scares me to death, but it's true. Her smile was radiant. I love you too, so much. I've wanted to say it for weeks, but I didn't want to push, didn't want to move too fast. He kissed her, cutting off the words, pouring 3 years of loneliness and 1 month of hope into the kiss. When they pulled apart, both of them were crying and laughing at the same time. Is this real? Avery asked. Are we really doing this? We're really doing this. What about work? The complications? We'll figure it out, together. From the back seat, Sophie's sleepy voice interrupted. Are you guys done being mushy? I'm trying to sleep. They both laughed, caught between joy and embarrassment. Sorry, Bug, Ethan said. It's okay. I'm glad you love each other. That means Avery will stay. I'm staying, Avery confirmed, meeting Ethan's eyes. I'm absolutely staying. The drive home felt like floating. Everything had shifted, foundations settling into place that Ethan hadn't even known were unstable. Janet's approval. The words exchanged, the future spreading out before them like a road finally visible after years of fog. At home, Ethan carried Sophie to bed while Avery waited downstairs. When he came back down, she was looking at the photos on the mantel, the wedding picture, the family portraits, all the frozen moments of the life he'd had before. I'm not trying to erase her, Avery said without turning around. I need you to know that. I do know that. Ethan came to stand beside her. Rebecca will always be part of our story, our history, but you're part of our future. Our future, Avery repeated, testing the words. I like the sound of that. They stood together in the quiet house, looking at photographs of the past while building something new. And for the first time since Rebecca died, Ethan felt the weight of guilt lift. Not disappear. It would probably never fully disappear, but lighten enough to breathe beneath. Love didn't replace love. It added to it, expanded it, made room for new chapters without erasing the old ones. Avery stayed that night, and the next, and the one after that. Within 2 weeks, she had a drawer in Ethan's dresser. Within a month, her toothbrush lived in the bathroom, and her coffee mug had a permanent spot in the cabinet. The transformation happened so gradually that Ethan barely noticed until he woke up one morning to find Avery making breakfast while Sophie did homework at the kitchen table and realized this was his life now. Complete. Full. Happy. And though Rebecca's photos still lined the walls and her memories still lived in every corner of the house, there was room now for new memories too. For laughter and hope, and the beautiful, terrifying possibility of loving again. 3 months passed in a blur of ordinary moments that felt extraordinary simply because they existed. Avery's presence in their lives stopped feeling like a guest and started feeling like gravity, essential, constant, the thing that kept everything in orbit. She had her own key now, her own parking spot in the driveway, her own spot on the couch where Sophie would curl up against her during movie nights. But it was the small things that revealed how deeply she'd woven herself into their fabric. The way she knew Sophie liked her sandwiches cut diagonally, not straight across. How she'd learned that Ethan went silent when he was stressed and needed space, not questions. The way she'd started calling Janet every Thursday just to chat, building her own relationship with Rebecca's mother that existed independent of Ethan. The office had finally figured it out, of course. They weren't stupid, and Ethan and Avery had stopped being quite so careful about the glances that lingered too long in meetings, the smiles that meant more than professional courtesy. The revelation came during a company happy hour when Sophie had called Ethan's cell and Avery had answered it, laughing as she promised to bring home pizza. Tom Chen had gone very quiet, his eyes moving between them. You two are together. It wasn't a question. Yes, Avery had said simply, no apology in her voice. We are. The gossip had exploded for exactly 3 days before everyone moved on to more interesting scandals. Ethan's promotion had happened before they were officially together. The projects he led were legitimately excellent, and Avery had built the company on merit, not favoritism. There was nothing scandalous about two adults finding each other, especially when one of them had proven himself worthy of his position long before romance entered the picture. Still, Ethan had worried about perception, about Sophie seeing him as unprofessional, about whether loving his boss made him weak somehow. You're overthinking this, Avery had said one night, finding him staring at his laptop in the home office she'd helped him organize. We're two people who fell in love. That's allowed? What if people think I'm using you for my career? Then they're idiots who don't know you. She'd spun his chair around to face her. Ethan, you earned everything you have, your talent, your dedication, your brilliant mind. Those existed long before I showed up with hot chocolate on your porch. Anyone who can't see that isn't worth your energy. You showed up with hot chocolate, he'd corrected with a small smile. I opened the door. Best decision you ever made. Second best, he'd countered, pulling her into his lap. First was accidentally texting you instead of Rebecca's old number. You romantic. Now standing in his bedroom on a Saturday morning in early November, Ethan stared at the small velvet box in his hand and wondered if he was about to make the best decision of his life or ruin everything they'd built. 6 months. They'd only been together 6 months. Was that too soon? Too fast? Would Avery think he was rushing, trying to replace what he'd lost rather than building something new? Daddy, are you okay? Ethan spun around to find Sophie in his doorway, already dressed for the day in jeans and her favorite purple sweater, the one Avery had bought her last month. I'm fine, Bug. Just thinking. Sophie's eyes dropped to the box in his hand. Her expression transformed into something between shock and pure delight. Is that a ring? There was no point lying to his daughter. Yeah. For Avery? Yeah. Sophie launched herself at him, wrapping her arms around his waist in a tackle hug that nearly knocked him over. You're going to propose. You're going to marry Avery. Shh. She's downstairs making breakfast. She can't know yet. Sophie pulled back, her eyes shining. Can I help? Please, 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 can I help? Ethan crouched down to her level, his heart hammering. Actually, I was hoping you'd want to be involved. This isn't just about me and Avery. This is about all three of us becoming a real family. We're already a real family, Sophie said seriously, but I want to help anyway. I was thinking we could go to the park, the one where Avery first came with us. We could have a picnic and I could give her the ring. Sophie's face was glowing. Or we could both ask her, like a team. Actually, I was thinking something even better. Ethan pulled out his phone, showing Sophie the photos he'd been looking at for weeks. What if we got that dog you've been asking for? We could surprise her with the puppy, and then while she's distracted, we could ask her together. Sophie's shriek of joy could probably be heard 3 blocks away. Sophie? Everything okay up there? Avery's voice floated up from downstairs. Everything's perfect, Sophie yelled back, then clapped her hand over her mouth, looking at Ethan with wide eyes. Sorry, I'm just really excited. Me too, Bug, but we need to plan this carefully. Can you keep a secret? I'm the best secret keeper ever. That's debatable, but we'll work with it. They spent the next hour huddled in Ethan's room, plotting like co-conspirators. Sophie had opinions on everything, the type of dog they should get, what color the ring box should be wrapped in, whether they should invite Grammy Janet, what kind of sandwiches to pack for the picnic. We need peanut butter and jelly for me, and those fancy turkey ones Avery likes, and chips, and cookies, and Bug, we're proposing not feeding an army. But what if she says yes and we need to celebrate? We should have champagne. You're 8. You can't have champagne. Sparkling cider then, the fancy kind in the pretty bottles. Ethan pulled his daughter close, kissing the top of her head. When did you get so smart? I've always been smart. You just noticed. Downstairs, Avery had made her signature pancakes, the ones Sophie now requested more than Ethan's because Avery's are fluffier, Daddy. No offense. She looked up when they appeared, her hair pulled back in a messy bun, wearing one of Ethan's old college t-shirts that hung to mid-thigh. She looked like home. There you two are. I was about to send a search party. She flipped a pancake expertly. What were you doing up there? Secret stuff, Sophie said, then immediately looked guilty. Avery's eyebrows rose. Secret stuff? Very secret, Ethan confirmed, shooting Sophie a warning look. Nothing for you to worry about. Avery studied them both with mock suspicion. You two are terrible conspirators. But okay, I'll play along. She slid pancakes onto plates. Eat up. I thought we could go to the farmer's market today. Sophie's been asking about that pottery class. Actually, Ethan said carefully, I was thinking we could go to the park instead. Have a picnic. The weather's supposed to be beautiful. A picnic in November? It's going to be 65 and sunny. Might be the last nice day before winter really hits. Avery looked between them, clearly sensing something was up, but she smiled. Okay, a picnic sounds lovely. While Avery showered, Ethan and Sophie packed the picnic basket with military precision. Sandwiches wrapped individually, Sophie's special cookies in a separate container, the sparkling cider packed in ice, blankets and pillows for sitting on the grass. Don't forget napkins, Sophie whispered. Grammy says you always need more napkins than you think. Good call. Ethan's phone buzzed. A text from Janet, who he'd called last night to ask for her blessing. Rebecca would be so happy for you both. Go make your new family official. His throat tightened. Getting Janet's approval had been essential, not just for himself, but for Sophie. The fact that Rebecca's mother was encouraging this, was supporting them, felt like the final piece clicking into place. The animal shelter opened at 10. Ethan had called ahead, explained the situation, and they'd promised to have a few young dogs ready for him to meet. He'd told them the criteria: good with kids, gentle, energetic, but not hyper, and preferably a rescue who needed a home as much as they needed a dog. We're going to the shelter first? Sophie asked as they loaded into Avery's car. She'd insisted on driving since Ethan seemed weirdly nervous. Quick stop, Ethan said. I need to pick something up. Avery gave him a look but didn't press. At the shelter, Ethan told Avery and Sophie to wait in the car for just a minute. He went inside, met with the coordinator, and 10 minutes later emerged carrying a squirming golden retriever puppy with a red bow around her neck. Sophie's scream could probably be heard in the next county. A puppy! Daddy got us a puppy! Avery's face went from confusion to shock to pure joy in the span of 3 seconds. Ethan, what? Meet the newest member of our family, he said, bringing the puppy to the car window where Sophie was practically climbing over Avery to get closer. She's 12 weeks old, she's been fully checked by the vet, and she needs a home. We're really getting a dog? Sophie's eyes were wet with tears. Really? Really? Really. Avery was crying too, though she was trying to hide it. Ethan, we should have discussed this. I know, but I wanted to surprise you both, and this little girl needed us. He opened the car door, letting Sophie scramble out to meet the puppy properly. What should we name her? Stella, Sophie declared immediately. Because stars are beautiful, and Avery taught me about stars, and she's golden like a star, and Stella it is, Ethan agreed. They spent 20 minutes at the shelter completing paperwork, getting supplies, listening to care instructions. The coordinator smiled knowingly the whole time, clearly understanding this was about more than just adopting a dog. You have a beautiful family, she said as they were leaving. Ethan caught Avery's eye across the room. We do. At the park, they spread blankets under the same oak tree where Avery had first pushed Sophie on the swing 6 months ago. Stella immediately sprawled across Sophie's lap, exhausted from her big morning. The sun was warm, the leaves were turning brilliant shades of red and gold, and the park was relatively empty on a Saturday morning. Perfect. They ate lunch while Sophie chattered about Stella's training schedule and whether dogs could learn to play fetch with frisbees, and if Stella could sleep in her room. Avery kept looking at Ethan with questions in her eyes, clearly sensing this was more than just a spontaneous picnic. When they'd finished eating, when Sophie had run off to throw a ball for Stella in the grass, Ethan stood and offered Avery his hand. Walk with me? Okay. They walked to the playground, to the swings where so much had started. Ethan's heart was hammering so hard he was sure Avery could hear it. You're nervous, she observed. Why are you nervous? Because I'm about to do something terrifying. Ethan, let me finish. He turned to face her, taking both her hands. 6 months ago, I sent you a text meant for someone else. I was drowning in grief and loneliness and just trying to survive each day. I never expected you to answer. I definitely never expected you to show up at my house with coffee and kindness and the willingness to sit with me in my pain. Avery's eyes were already glistening. You've given me my life back, Ethan continued. Not the old life. That's gone and I've made peace with that. But a new life. One where I laugh again and hope again and actually look forward to tomorrow. You've given Sophie a woman she adores, someone who listens to her dreams and helps with homework and understands that grief doesn't have an expiration date. You've given us both so much. Ethan, what are you saying? I'm saying I love you. I'm saying I want you in our lives forever, not just for now. I'm saying... He started to drop to one knee, but Sophie's voice interrupted. Wait, I'm supposed to be part of this. They both turned to find Sophie running toward them, Stella bouncing along beside her on her new leash. Sorry, Sophie panted, but Daddy said we're doing this together, as a family. Avery's hand flew to her mouth, tears streaming freely now. Ethan and Sophie knelt down together, Sophie pulling the ring box from her pocket. When had she even grabbed it, and opening it to reveal a simple but elegant diamond ring? Avery, Ethan said, his voice thick with emotion, will you marry me? And be my bonus mom forever? Sophie added, and help me train Stella and come to my school stuff and be part of our family officially? Avery was crying too hard to speak. She dropped to her knees in front of them, pulling them both into a fierce hug. Stella barked excitedly, apparently thinking this was a new game. Yes, Avery finally managed. Yes to all of it. Yes to forever. Yes to being a family. Just yes. Ethan slipped the ring onto her finger with shaking hands while Sophie cheered. Around them, a few other park visitors had noticed what was happening and started clapping. But Ethan barely heard them. His whole world had narrowed to Avery's tear-streaked face, Sophie's joyful laughter, and the puppy trying to lick everyone at once. I love you both so much, Avery said, her voice breaking. I never thought I'd have this again, a family, people to come home to, someone to build a future with. You have us now, Sophie declared. Forever and ever. Forever and ever, Avery agreed. They stayed in the park for hours, playing with Stella, taking ridiculous selfies to send to Janet, lying on the blankets and watching clouds drift by. Sophie talked non-stop about the wedding. Could she be the flower girl? Could Stella be in it too? Could they have a cake with purple frosting? When were they getting married anyway? We just got engaged 5 minutes ago, Ethan laughed. We haven't planned anything yet, but I have ideas. I'm sure you do. As the sun started to sink lower, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, they packed up their things and headed home. The house felt different when they walked in. Not because anything had changed physically, but because everything had changed fundamentally. This wasn't Ethan's house where Avery visited anymore. This was their home. All three of them. 4, counting Stella. That night, after Sophie had fallen asleep with Stella curled up at the foot of her bed, after they'd called Janet and Avery's few remaining family members to share the news, after the excitement had settled into quiet contentment, Ethan and Avery sat on the back porch under the stars. I can't believe this is real, Avery said, holding her hand up to watch the ring catch the moonlight. Sometimes I think I'm going to wake up and it'll all be a dream. The text, you, Sophie, all of it. It's real. Ethan pulled her closer. Very, very real. When should we get married? Whenever you want. I don't want to wait long, Avery admitted. Is that crazy? We've only been together 6 months. We've only been officially together 6 months, but we've been building this relationship from that first night in my office, when you sat there and shared your grief and made me feel less alone. Ethan kissed her temple. I'd marry you tomorrow if we could. Sophie would kill us if we didn't let her plan things. Very true. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars that Rebecca had once loved, that Avery had taught Sophie about, that would keep shining long after all of them were gone. Do you think she'd be okay with this? Avery asked quietly. Rebecca? Ethan had thought about this question 100 times. Yeah, I really do. She told Janet to make sure I found someone. She wouldn't want me or Sophie to be alone forever. But does it feel like you're betraying her? Sometimes I worry that You're not replacing her, Ethan said firmly. You're writing a new chapter. There's a difference. He turned to face Avery fully. Rebecca was my first love, the mother of my child. She'll always be part of our story. But you're my future, Avery. You and Sophie and whatever life we build together, both things can be true. I want to honor her, Avery said. In the wedding, in our life. I don't want Sophie to ever feel like we're erasing her mother. We won't. We'll keep her pictures up, keep her memories alive, talk about her openly. She's Sophie's mom. That never changes. But I can be her bonus mom. The best bonus mom. Avery leaned her head on his shoulder. How did I get so lucky to find you both when I'd given up on finding anyone? Wrong text, Ethan reminded her with a smile. Best mistake I ever made. The wedding planning consumed the next 3 months in the best possible way. Sophie took her role as chief wedding planner very seriously, creating binders full of ideas and insisting on being involved in every decision. Janet helped with coordination. Her initial reservations completely dissolved in the face of Sophie's enthusiasm and Avery's genuine love for her granddaughter. They decided on a small ceremony in early spring, just close friends and family, nothing elaborate. The backyard of their house, under the oak tree that Ethan had planted with Rebecca years ago. Avery had suggested it, saying she wanted to get married in the place where their blended family would live, surrounded by both past and future. The oak tree Rebecca planted should be part of this, she'd said. She's part of Sophie, and Sophie is part of us. The tree stays. That single gesture had made Janet cry harder than anything else. The venue settled, they focused on the details. Sophie insisted on a purple and silver color scheme, because purple is my favorite and silver is like stars. The cake would be chocolate with vanilla frosting, because that's what everyone liked. And yes, Stella could be in the wedding, wearing a bow tie and carrying rings attached to her collar. This is going to be the best wedding ever, Sophie declared at least once a day. At work, Ethan and Avery made it official that they'd be merging households. They handled the HR paperwork professionally, ensuring everything was documented and above board. Ethan reported to a different supervisor now anyway, so there was no direct conflict of interest. The firm had grown enough that Avery couldn't personally oversee every architect, which made their relationship even less complicated professionally. People are happy for us, Avery reported after a company meeting. I think they like seeing that their workaholic CEO is actually human. You've always been human. I hit it very well. The night before the wedding, Janet came over for dinner. It had become a tradition, Thursday night dinners with Grammy, where they'd talk about Rebecca openly and keep her memory alive. Sophie would share things she remembered, Janet would tell stories from Rebecca's childhood, and Avery would listen with genuine interest, adding her own observations about how Sophie was like her mother. You know what Rebecca would love, Janet said as they cleared dishes? How much you include her in your lives. How you don't treat her memory like something sad to avoid. She's not sad to remember, Avery said simply. She was Sophie's mother and Ethan's wife. She mattered. She still matters. Janet hugged her tight. I'm so glad you found each other. Both of you deserve this happiness. That night, Ethan found Avery standing in front of the photo of Rebecca on the mantel, the wedding photo that had been there for years. I bought a new frame, Avery said quietly. For after tomorrow. It's a double frame. Room for Rebecca's photo and one of ours. I thought we could put them side by side. Both marriages, both loves, both important. Ethan felt his throat close up. You did? Is that okay? I wanted to ask first, but I saw it at the store and I thought... He kissed her, stopping the nervous rambling. It's perfect. You're perfect. I'm nervous about tomorrow, she admitted. What if I mess up my vows? What if Stella runs away with the rings? What if everything goes perfectly and we get married and start our life together officially? That too. Then it'll be the best day of our lives, all three of our lives. The wedding day dawned clear and beautiful, the spring sunshine warm without being hot, the backyard garden in full bloom. Janet arrived early to help with last-minute details, and Sophie was vibrating with excitement in her purple flower girl dress. Do I look pretty? She asked for the 100th time. You look beautiful, Ethan assured her, just like your mom on our wedding day. Sophie beamed. Really? Really, she'd be so proud of you, Bug. Avery got dressed in the guest room with help from her friend Christine and Janet, who'd become surrogate family over the past months. Her dress was simple and elegant, ivory instead of white, with delicate lace sleeves and a flowing skirt. You look stunning, Janet said, tears in her eyes. Rebecca would have loved you, as a daughter, as a friend, as the woman taking care of her family. She would have loved you. I hope so, Avery whispered. I'm trying so hard to honor her while building something new. You're doing both beautifully. The ceremony was small but perfect. 25 people gathered in the backyard. Close friends, Janet, a few colleagues, Avery's aunt and uncle. Sophie stood at the front with Stella, who'd been surprisingly well-behaved all morning. Ethan waited under the oak tree, his heart full to bursting as he watched Avery walk down the makeshift aisle. She was holding a bouquet of yellow roses, Janet's favorite, Rebecca's favorite, mixed with purple irises for Sophie. The officiant kept it simple, talking about love that grows from grief, about families formed not just by blood but by choice, about second chances and new beginnings. When it came time for vows, Ethan spoke first. Avery, 6 months ago I thought my life was over. I thought I'd used up my chance at happiness, that grief would be my only companion. Then you showed up with coffee and hot chocolate and the courage to sit with a stranger's pain. His voice shook but held. You gave me back my life. You gave Sophie a woman who loves her unconditionally. You gave us both hope that tomorrow could be better than today. I promise to love you fiercely, to support your dreams, to be your partner in everything. I promise to honor your past while building our future. And I promise that every day I'll thank whatever force in the universe made me send that text to the wrong person. Avery was crying, but she was smiling too. When she spoke, her voice was clear and strong. Ethan, I spent 7 years convinced I'd never love again, that James was my one chance and I'd missed it. I built walls so high that no one could get through. But then I read your text, this raw, beautiful expression of grief, and something in those walls cracked open. She looked at Sophie, including her in the vows. You both showed me that families can be rebuilt, that love isn't finite, that it's possible to honor what we've lost while embracing what we've found. I promise to love you both with everything I have, to be present, to be patient, to be worthy of this incredible gift you've given me. And I promise to keep sending you both good morning texts even though we live together now because some traditions are too perfect to break. Everyone laughed through their tears. Sophie stepped forward, pulling a folded piece of paper from her dress pocket. I wrote vows too, she announced, because I'm part of this family. The officiant smiled. Go ahead, Sophie. Sophie took a deep breath. Avery, when you came to our house that first day, I thought you were pretty. But then you helped me with my solar system and you pushed me on the swings and you listened when I talked about Mama. You didn't try to replace her. You made space for her and for you at the same time. She looked at her grandmother, at the gathered friends, at the oak tree planted years ago. I promised to do my homework without complaining too much, and to help train Stella, and to always tell you when I'm sad about Mama, because you said it's okay to be sad and happy at the same time. And I promise to love you forever, because you love my daddy and you love me, and that makes you family. There wasn't a dry eye in the backyard. The officiant cleared his throat, visibly moved. By the power vested in me and with the blessing of this beautiful family, I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss your bride. Ethan pulled Avery close and kissed her while everyone cheered. Sophie jumped up and down clapping, Stella barked excitedly, and the spring sunshine seemed to glow brighter. The reception was simple: catered food, a small dance floor, Sophie's requested chocolate cake with vanilla frosting. They'd set up a memory table with photos of both James and Rebecca, honoring the loves that had come before, the people who'd shaped them into who they were. To the happy couple, Janet said, raising her glass for a toast. May your love be as strong as the trials you've overcome. May your family be filled with laughter and joy. And may you both know that Rebecca is watching over you, smiling at the beautiful life you're building. Later, as the sun set and the string lights glowed overhead, Ethan and Avery had their first dance. Sophie insisted on joining halfway through, and they ended up as a group of 3 swaying together while Stella wove between their legs. This is perfect, Sophie sighed contentedly. We're a real family now. We were always a real family, Avery corrected gently. Today just made it official. That night, after the guests had left and Sophie had finally gone to bed exhausted and happy, Ethan and Avery stood in their bedroom. Officially their bedroom now. No more guest room pretense. "We did it," Avery said, still wearing her wedding dress, her hair falling loose from its updo. "We actually got married." "Having second thoughts already?" Ethan teased. "Not even for a second." She turned to face him. "Do you know what the best part of today was?" "The cake?" "Sophie's vows. The way she claimed me as family. The way she included Rebecca in everything, without making it sad." Avery's eyes were wet again. "I was so scared she'd resent me, that I'd never be enough. But she just made room, like it was the easiest thing in the world." Kids are resilient like that. They understand love differently than we do, more simply. She's an incredible kid. You've done an amazing job with her. "We've done an amazing job with her," Ethan corrected. "You've been parenting her for months now. You get credit too." They changed out of their wedding clothes and lay in bed together, exhausted but too wired to sleep. Through the window, the stars were brilliant, the same stars Rebecca had loved, the same stars Avery had taught Sophie about. "Do you think she's up there watching?" Avery asked quietly. "Rebecca. Yeah, I think she is, and I think she's happy for us. I hope so. I want her to know that I love her daughter, that I'll take care of her family, that I'm not trying to take her place, just make my own. She knows." Ethan pulled Avery closer. "And she's grateful. I can feel it." 1 year later, they stood in the same backyard for Sophie's 9th birthday party. The oak tree had grown taller, stronger. Stella was full grown now, gentle and loyal, and Sophie's constant companion. The house had been remodeled slightly. Avery's home office added on, new photos on the walls showing their blended life. Sophie blew out her candles surrounded by friends and family, Janet and Avery working together in the kitchen like they'd been doing it for years. The photos of Rebecca were still prominent, but they'd been joined by wedding photos, family portraits, images of their new life. "Make a wish, Bug," Ethan encouraged. Sophie closed her eyes tight, then opened them with a grin. "I wished for a baby sister or brother." Ethan and Avery's eyes met across the table. They'd been talking about it carefully, wondering if expanding their family was too much too soon or exactly what they all needed. "That's a pretty big wish," Avery said carefully. "I know, but Grammy says if you wish hard enough and work toward it, wishes can come true." Sophie looked between them hopefully. "So are you working toward it?" The adults laughed, and Janet just shook her head with a knowing smile. That night, after the party cleanup and after Sophie had fallen asleep with Stella, as always, Ethan found Avery standing in what had been Rebecca's office, what had briefly been a guest room, what was now just an empty room waiting for a purpose. "What are you thinking?" he asked, wrapping his arms around her from behind. "I'm thinking this would make a beautiful nursery," she said softly. "I'm thinking Sophie's wish might not be so far-fetched. I'm thinking—" She turned in his arms. "I'm thinking I want to have a baby with you, if you want that too." "I want everything with you," Ethan said simply. "A baby, a future, all of it. It won't replace Rebecca's memory. Nothing could, and nothing should. But adding to our family, growing our love, that's not replacement. That's expansion." He kissed her forehead. "Let's do it. Let's give Sophie that baby sister or brother she wished for." 6 months later, Avery stood in the bathroom staring at a positive pregnancy test while Sophie bounced excitedly outside the door and Ethan tried not to pass out from joy and terror in equal measure. "I'm going to be a big sister," Sophie shouted. "Can we name the baby Stella if it's a girl? Oh wait, that's the dog's name. Never mind." Life moved forward in the beautiful, messy way life always did. The baby came, a girl they named Emma Rose, after Sophie's best friend and Rebecca's middle name. Sophie was an incredible big sister. Stella appointed herself guardian, and their family of 3 became 4. Janet held her new granddaughter and cried happy tears, saying Rebecca would have loved knowing Sophie had a sister. And somehow, even though Rebecca was gone, she felt present in every moment, in Sophie's laugh that sounded like her mother's, in the oak tree that shaded their backyard, in the way Ethan had learned to love again without forgetting his first love. Years passed. Sophie graduated elementary school, then middle school, with Avery and Ethan at every recital and awards ceremony. Emma grew from baby to toddler to little girl, knowing both her big sister and the mother she'd never met, Because they kept Rebecca's memory alive through stories and photos and open conversations about grief and love. On the 10th anniversary of that first mistaken text, Ethan pulled out his phone and scrolled back through the messages. The entire relationship documented in text form, from that first vulnerable confession to Avery's gentle response to thousands of messages exchanged over the years. "What are you looking at?" Avery asked, coming to sit beside him on the couch. The text that started everything. She leaned against his shoulder, reading the screen. "I miss you. Some nights it still hurts to breathe without you," she read aloud. "You were so raw, so honest. I was broken, and I was honored that you let me sit with you in that brokenness." They sat in comfortable silence, Stella asleep at their feet, the sounds of Sophie reading to Emma floating down from upstairs. The life they'd built from grief and hope and accidental messages. "Do you know what I realized?" Avery said finally. "That text wasn't a mistake. You were supposed to send it to me. The universe or fate or whatever you want to call it, it knew we needed each other." "You think the universe orchestrated a wrong number text?" "I think grief led you to reach out, and I was meant to answer. However it happened, I'm grateful." Ethan pulled her closer, kissing the top of her head. "Me too. Every single day." Upstairs, Sophie's voice carried down. "And that's how Daddy and Avery met, Emma. He sent the wrong text to the right person." Emma's little voice responded, "That's the best story ever." And it was. Not because it was perfect or easy or without pain, but because it was real. Because two broken people had found each other in the dark and chosen to build something beautiful in the light. Because love didn't end when someone died. It just transformed, made room, expanded to include new chapters while honoring the old ones. The house that had once echoed with grief now rang with laughter. The man who'd thought his life was over had found a reason to keep living. The woman who'd buried herself in work had discovered that home wasn't a place, but people who loved you. And the little girl who'd lost her mother had gained a family that made sure she never forgot where she came from while helping her grow into who she was meant to be. Sometimes the wrong text goes to exactly the right person. Sometimes broken pieces fit together to make something whole. Sometimes love finds a way back in, even when you think the door is locked forever. And sometimes the best family is the one you choose to build together, brick by brick, text by text, moment by moment, until one day you look around and realize that what started as a mistake has become the most beautiful thing in your life. Ethan looked at Avery, at the ring on her finger, at the life they'd created together. He thought about Rebecca watching from wherever she was, proud of the family they'd become. He thought about the text he'd meant to send to a dead woman's phone and the living woman who'd answered instead. And he smiled because for the first time in years, the future looked brighter than the past. Not because the pain was gone, it would never be fully gone, but because love had found its way back in. And that made all the difference.